Have you ever tried to hold water in your hands? Cupping them together, you create a small, fragile bowl, a temporary vessel for something that was never meant to be held. At first, it feels simple. The cool liquid rests against your skin, contained and still. But then, an impulse arises, a fear of losing it, and so you begin to squeeze, to tighten your grip, believing that more effort will lead to more control. And in that very moment, you fail. The water escapes, running in streams through the cracks between your fingers, and the more desperately you clench, the faster it disappears, until all you are left with is the damp, empty ache of your own striving. This is the story of our lives. We are living in a state of constant, quiet desperation, trying to hold the uncontrollable water of life in our tightly clenched fists. We try to hold on to pleasant moments, to secure a future that is forever uncertain, to control the opinions of others, to prevent the inevitable tides of change, aging, and loss. This struggle, this silent, exhausting war against the nature of reality, is the source of our deepest anxieties. It is the hum of stress beneath the surface of our days, the feeling of being perpetually overwhelmed, the sense that no matter how much we achieve, or acquire, or perfect, something essential is still missing. We have been taught that the answer is to squeeze harder, to plan more meticulously, to work longer hours, to build higher walls. But what if the true path to peace is not found in strengthening our grip, but in the radical act of opening our hands? What if the solution is not to fight with more force, but to finally cease the fight altogether? This is the path of acceptance, not a passive resignation, not an admission of defeat, but an active, courageous, and deeply intelligent engagement with life as it truly is. It is the wisdom to recognize the difference between the pain that life sometimes brings and the suffering we create for ourselves by resisting that pain. For thousands of years, the teachings of Buddhism have offered a profound and practical guide to this very art, a set of tools designed to help us unclench our fists, to soothe our own self-inflicted wounds, and to discover the vast, unshakable peace that is waiting for us, right here, in the midst of everything. This is an invitation to walk that path, to explore the transformative power of acceptance, and to learn how to finally find rest, even as the river of life continues to flow. To begin this journey of acceptance, we must first have the courage to look directly at the thing we are trying to accept. We must look at the nature of our own discontent. In the language of the Buddha, this fundamental human experience is called dukkha. Now, the word suffering, its common English translation, is heavy, laden with images of tragedy and intense agony. And while dukkha certainly includes this, its meaning is far broader, more subtle, and much more personal to our daily lives. To misunderstand dukkha is to misunderstand the entire purpose of the path. The Buddha's first teaching, the very foundation upon which all his other wisdom rests, is known as the first noble truth. There is suffering. This is not a pessimistic decree. It is not a judgment that life is bad or flawed. It is a diagnosis. It is the compassionate, clear-eyed observation of a physician looking at the human condition. A doctor cannot offer a cure without first acknowledging the existence and nature of the illness. Similarly, we cannot find peace until we first acknowledge the nature of our own disquiet. It is a noble truth because seeing it, understanding it, and accepting it is the first step toward liberation from it. It frees us from the isolating belief that our anxiety or dissatisfaction is a personal failure, a sign that we are doing something wrong. It allows us to see our own struggles as part of a shared, universal human experience. Dukkha manifests in our lives in three distinct, yet interwoven, ways. The first is the most obvious, the suffering of suffering, or dukkha. Dukkha. This is the raw, undeniable pain of existence. It is the headache that throbs behind your eyes, the chronic ache in your back, the chilling diagnosis from a doctor. It is the sharp grief that hollows you out when you lose someone you love, the sting of betrayal, the panic of financial instability, the deep sorrow of a broken heart. This is the pain we actively try to avoid, the overt unpleasantness of life that we push away, deny, or numb ourselves to. It is real, it is unavoidable, and it is a part of being alive in a physical body within a world of relationships and events. No one is immune to this form of dukkha. It is the shared ground of our vulnerability. The second form is more subtle and perhaps more pervasive in our modern world. It is the suffering of change, or viparinama dukkha. This is the anxiety that lurks just beneath the surface of our happiest moments. You are on a beautiful vacation. The sun is warm. The view is perfect. But a small voice whispers, "This will end soon." You are in the first flush of a new love, and yet there is a quiet fear of the moment when the initial passion might fade, or the relationship might change. You achieve a long-sought goal, but the pleasure is fleeting, and almost immediately the mind begins to seek the next achievement. This is the suffering born from the truth of impermanence. We cling to what is pleasant, and because everything is in a constant state of flux, this clinging inevitably leads to anxiety and disappointment. The joy itself becomes a source of suffering because we are so afraid of losing it. We cannot fully relax into the good moments because we are already bracing for their departure. This is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of chasing pleasure, a race we can never truly win because the finish line is always moving. It is the suffering of knowing that the beautiful sandcastle we build will be washed away by the next tide. The third and most profound form is the suffering of conditioned existence, or sankhara dukkha. This is the deep, underlying background hum of dissatisfaction that permeates our entire experience. It's not about a specific pain or a specific pleasure fading away. It is the general sense that something is not quite right, a fundamental incompleteness. It is the restlessness of the mind, the subtle stress of having to be a self, an ego that we must constantly defend, promote, and manage. It is the exhausting effort of maintaining our identity, our opinions, our possessions, and our place in the world. It is the subtle friction of existence itself, the inherent unreliability and uncontrollability of a life composed of constantly shifting physical and mental components. This is the water slipping through our fingers, not because of a specific event, but simply because that is its nature. Sankhara dukkha is the quiet realization that even when everything is objectively fine, we still feel a sense of unease, a longing for something more, a vague but persistent thirst that is never truly quenched. This is the ultimate spiritual problem the Buddha's teachings seek to address. There is perhaps no story that illustrates the journey into this understanding more powerfully than that of Kisa Gotami. She was a young woman whose life was defined by one all-consuming joy, her infant son. Then, one day, the child fell ill and died. Kisa Gotami was shattered, but more than that, she was in denial. She could not accept the reality of this loss. Clutching the small, still body to her chest, she went from house to house, from neighbor to neighbor, frantically begging for medicine that could restore her son's life. Some pitied her, others scorned her apparent madness, but no one could help. Finally, A wise man saw her profound despair and, instead of dismissing her, showed her a path. He told her to go and see the Buddha, for he was the great physician who might have the cure she sought. Kisa Gotami ran to the Buddha, laid the body of her son at his feet, and explained her desperate quest. The Buddha looked at her not with judgment, but with an ocean of compassion. He did not lecture her on the nature of death. He did not tell her to simply accept her fate. Instead, he met her where she was. He said to her, "There is only one way to heal your son. You must bring me a single mustard seed, but it must be taken from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a husband, a parent, or a friend." A flicker of hope ignited in Kisa Gotami's heart. This seemed like such a simple task. A mustard seed was a common thing, full of renewed purpose. She began her journey again, going from door to door. At the first house, she asked for the seed, and the woman there said, "Of course, I will give you a handful." But as the woman turned to get it, Kisa Gotami remembered the Buddha's condition. "Wait," she asked, "has anyone in this house ever died? Have you ever lost a loved one?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said, "you remind me of my deepest sorrow. The living are few, but the dead are many. I lost my husband just last year." Dejected, Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same at every door. One family had lost a parent, another had lost a child, another, a dear friend. Every household had been visited by death. Every person she spoke to shared a story of grief. Her frantic, personal, and isolating sorrow began to transform. She started to see that her pain was not uniquely hers. The arrow of loss that had struck her had, in fact, struck every single person she met. Her grief was not a punishment or a mistake. It was the price of love, a fundamental, universal thread in the fabric of human life. As the sun began to set, she sat down by the side of the road, watching the flickering lights of the city. She realized they flared up, and then they died down, just like the lives of people. In that moment, her resistance broke. She understood. She went to a charnel ground, laid her son's body to rest, and returned to the Buddha, not with a mustard seed, but with the quiet stillness of profound acceptance. She had realized that the medicine she was seeking was not for her son, but for herself, and that medicine was wisdom. This story beautifully illustrates the distinction between pain and suffering. The Buddha often spoke of this, using the parable of the two arrows. When you are walking through the forest, he said, you might be struck by an arrow. This is the first arrow. It is the painful event itself. It is the loss of a child, the diagnosis of an illness, the sting of criticism. This first arrow is often unavoidable. It is the dukkha, the inherent pain of life. Now, an ordinary person, when struck by this first arrow, will immediately react with fear, anger, and despair. They will ask, "Why me? This is terrible. I can't bear it." This reaction, this mental proliferation, is the second arrow. It is the arrow that we shoot into ourselves. The first arrow is pain. The second arrow is suffering. Kisa Gotami was struck by the first arrow of her son's death. Her frantic denial, her desperate search, her feeling of isolated agony, these were all second arrows, shot by her own mind, multiplying the initial pain 1,000-fold. The Buddha's task did not remove the first arrow. Her son was still gone. But by guiding her to a universal truth, he helped her to stop shooting the second arrows. The practice of acceptance, then, is not about developing an immunity to the first arrow. It is about developing the wisdom and mindfulness to not inflict the second one upon ourselves. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we have a profound capacity to choose how we relate to it. Recognizing the universal truth of dukkha is the first, most crucial step. It is not an act of pessimism, but an act of supreme realism and compassion for ourselves and for all beings who, just like us, are simply trying to navigate the beautiful, painful, and ever-flowing river of life. Having seen that a baseline of dissatisfaction, or dukkha, is a fundamental part of the human condition, we are now ready to investigate its deepest roots. We suffer not simply because painful things happen, but because we fundamentally misunderstand the nature of reality itself. Our deepest suffering arises from our constant, unwinnable war against a universal law, a law as fundamental as gravity, yet one we spend our entire lives trying to deny. This law is called anicca, or impermanence. It is the second great mark of existence, and understanding it is not an intellectual exercise. It is a key that unlocks the prison of our own making. Anicca is the simple, yet profoundly challenging, truth that everything changes. Nothing is permanent. Everything that arises must, eventually, pass away. This is not a belief system. It is an observable fact. Look at the grandest scales of existence. Mountains, the very symbols of solidity and permanence, are slowly being worn down by wind and rain, grain by grain. Coastlines are redrawn by the patient work of the ocean. Stars, great nuclear furnaces that burn for billions of years, are born from clouds of dust and will eventually collapse into darkness. The entire universe is a vast, cosmic dance of arising and ceasing, a single, flowing process of change. We may accept this on a cosmic level, but we live our lives as if our own small corner of the universe is exempt from this law. Look at the world of our possessions. We buy a new car, and for a while, it is a source of joy and pride. Then comes the first scratch, the first dent, and we feel a pang of distress. We are not just upset about the cosmetic damage. We are upset because the illusion of permanence has been shattered. The perfect, new object has begun its inevitable journey toward decay. Our favorite coffee mug, our comfortable chair, the very house we live in, are all subject to this law. They will wear out, break, and eventually turn to dust. Our desperate clinging to these objects, our desire for them to remain new and perfect forever, is a constant source of low-level anxiety and inevitable disappointment. It is a fight against reality. We are guaranteed to lose. This truth extends to our situations and life circumstances. We land a dream job, and for a time, it is exciting and fulfilling. But with time, the novelty fades. Challenges arise, the company changes, or we ourselves change. The situation is impermanent. We go on a perfect vacation, a temporary island of bliss, and we spend much of the time either subtly dreading its end or trying to capture it in photographs, as if to make it solid, to prove it was real. We cling to periods of financial security, of health, of social stability, as if they are permanent states we have achieved, rather than temporary conditions that are subject to the ceaseless flow of cause and effect. Our suffering comes from this attempt to build a solid fortress on shifting sands, from demanding stability, from a world whose very nature is instability. Nowhere is this struggle more acute and more painful than in the realm of our internal world. Let us first look at our own bodies. We are conditioned by our culture to see the body as a static object, a thing that we own. But in reality, your body is not a noun. It is a verb. It is a process. Millions of your cells are dying and being born in this very moment. The air you just inhaled is changing your blood chemistry. The food you ate for lunch is being transformed into energy and structure. The body you inhabit today is not the same body you had a year ago, and it is not the same one you will have a year from now. We fight this process with all our might. We spend billions on creams and surgeries to deny the reality of aging. We feel betrayed by our bodies when they get sick or injured, as if they have broken a contract to remain young and healthy forever. Accepting the impermanence of the body is not about neglect. It is about releasing the immense burden of demanding it be something it cannot be, unchanging. It allows us to treat it with kindness and care as the precious, temporary vessel it is, rather than fighting a war against its very nature. Even more fleeting than the body are our emotions. Think of an emotion you felt yesterday. Where is it now? Joy arises, a beautiful, warm sensation, and we immediately cling to it, trying to hold on, which paradoxically suffocates the joy and introduces the fear of its departure. Sadness or anger arises, and we immediately resist it, pushing it down, denying its presence, treating it like an intruder. This resistance is what makes the emotion feel so solid and overwhelming. But if we were to simply observe, we would see that no emotion is permanent. It is like the weather. A storm comes, it rains, the wind blows, and then, inevitably, the clouds part and the sun returns. We do not get angry at the sky for raining. We know it is a temporary state. The wisdom of Anika is to treat our emotions with the same understanding. They are simply energy and information passing through us. By accepting their transient nature, we can allow ourselves to feel them fully without being consumed by them. We can let the storm of anger rage without becoming the storm itself. And what could be more transient, more ephemeral than our thoughts? Sit for just 1 minute and try to watch your own mind. A thought about work appears, followed by a memory from childhood, then a worry about the future, then a line from a song, then an image of a person's face. The mind is a waterfall of ceaseless activity, a torrent of thoughts arising and vanishing from one moment to the next. Our mistake and our suffering comes from identifying with this stream. We believe we are our thoughts. We grab onto a worrisome thought and follow it down a rabbit hole of anxiety. We grab onto a prideful thought and use it to inflate our ego. We are like a person standing by a river, believing every single piece of driftwood that floats by is a personal message that they must jump in and grapple with. The practice of accepting the impermanence of thought is the practice of learning to sit on the riverbank. We watch the thoughts float by interesting, boring, pleasant, unpleasant, without identifying with them, without clinging to them, without being swept away. This is the beginning of true mental freedom. There is a simple Zen story that captures this wisdom perfectly. A master and his student were walking on a beach. The master bent down and, with a stick, drew a large, perfect circle in the wet sand at the water's edge. They both stood back and admired its simple, elegant beauty. The student was captivated by its perfection. Just then, a wave rolled in, washing over the sand and completely erasing the circle, leaving the shoreline smooth and empty. The student was distraught. "Master," he cried, "it's gone. The beautiful circle you made has been destroyed." The master simply smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. He looked at the empty sand, then at his student, and said, "It was never destroyed. It was only completed." The wave did not ruin the circle. It fulfilled its nature. The beauty of the circle was never in its potential to last forever. Its beauty was contained entirely in the brief moment of its existence. This is the crucial shift in perspective that Anicca offers. Accepting impermanence is not a grim resignation to loss. It is the exact opposite. It is an invitation to fall in love with the present moment. It is precisely because things are temporary that they are so precious. Knowing that a conversation with a loved one is a unique, unrepeatable event allows us to listen more deeply. Knowing that a meal is a fleeting experience allows us to savor it more fully. Knowing that this very day will never come again gives us the motivation to live it with awareness and gratitude. The fear of loss is what paralyzes us. The acceptance of impermanence is what sets us free to live and to love with our whole hearts. It builds resilience. When we are in a period of great difficulty, the wisdom of Anicca is a comforting whisper. This, too, shall pass. It gives us the strength to endure, knowing that no state, no matter how painful, is permanent. So we return to the image of life as a great, flowing river. For most of our lives, we act as if our primary job is to build a dam. We expend enormous energy trying to stop the flow, to create a permanent, predictable reservoir of happiness and security. It is an exhausting, full-time job, and the dam is constantly springing leaks. It is a battle we can never win. The wisdom of Anicca suggests a different approach. Instead of building a dam, what if we were to build a raft? The raft does not stop the river. It does not control the river. It allows us to move with the river. It allows us to navigate its currents, to ride out its rapids, and to float peacefully in its calm stretches. It replaces resistance with skillful participation. Peace is not found in a static, motionless pool of our own making. It is found in the dynamic, graceful dance with the ever-changing flow of life itself. But this raises a profound question. If everything is changing our body, our thoughts, our feelings, our world, then who, exactly, is the one floating on this raft? What is this I that observes all this change? To answer that, we must turn to the third and most subtle mark of existence. We have journeyed to the heart of our unease, understanding that it arises from our struggle against the universal truths of dissatisfaction, or dukkha, and impermanence, or anicca. We see that our suffering is not caused by the river of change, but by our desperate attempts to dam it. This leads us to the most profound and perhaps most challenging question of all. Who is this I that is fighting this battle? Who is this self that feels the pain, that clings to pleasure, that fears change? We have a deep, intuitive sense of a central core, a thinker behind the thoughts, a feeler behind the feelings, a permanent chief executive sitting in the headquarters of our mind, making decisions and running the show. The Buddha's third great teaching, known as anatta, or no self, asks us to look directly at this assumption, and what it reveals is the most radical and liberating truth of all. That fixed, solid, independent self we feel, we are, does not actually exist. Now, this statement can be frightening. No self sounds like a declaration of nihilism, an assertion that we do not exist, that life is meaningless. This is the most critical misunderstanding to avoid. The teaching of anatta is not that you do not exist. You are clearly here, reading these words, thinking these thoughts, feeling these feelings. The teaching is that you do not exist as a separate, permanent, unchanging entity. The self is not a thing, it is a process. It is not a noun, it is a verb. Just as a flame is not a static object but a continuous process of combustion, your self is a continuous process of psychophysical events. To make this clear, the Buddha's teachings deconstruct our experience into 5 categories: known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. These are the components that we mistake for a solid self. The first aggregate is form. This is your physical body, with all its parts and functions. We often identify strongly with our bodies, but as we saw with Anika, the body is in a constant state of flux. It is aging, changing, and made up of non-body elements like the food we've eaten, the water we've drunk, and the air we've breathed. Are you your hand? If you lost it, would you be any less you? Are you your liver, your bones, your hair? Clearly, we are more than just our physical form. The body is something we have, not something we are. The second aggregate is sensation, or feeling. This refers to the raw data that comes through our senses, which is immediately categorized as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A cool breeze on a hot day is a pleasant sensation. The sound of a dental drill is an unpleasant sensation. The feeling of your clothes against your skin is likely neutral. These feelings are fleeting, arising, and passing away with every moment of contact with the world. Are you this fleeting pleasure? Are you this passing pain? If your identity depended on these feelings, yourself would be dying and reborn countless times a day. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, labels, and conceptualizes. It takes the raw data of sensation and gives it a name. It sees a collection of colors and shapes and labels it tree. It hears a certain tone of voice and labels it anger. Our perceptions are conditioned by our past experiences, our culture, and our language. They are not an objective window onto reality, but a conditioned interpretation of it. This process is also constantly changing. So, you cannot be your perceptions. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a vast and crucial category that includes all of our volitional activities. It is our thoughts, our opinions, our beliefs, our moods, our habits, our biases, our intentions, our desires, and our fears. This is the part we most strongly identify with. I am a kind person. I am an anxious person. I believe in justice. These feel like the very essence of who we are. But are they? Think of an opinion you held fiercely 10 years ago. Do you still hold it now? Think of the anger you felt yesterday. Where is it today? These mental formations are also impermanent, conditioned phenomena. They are clouds passing through the sky of the mind, not the sky itself. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This is the faculty of raw awareness. It is the light that allows the other 4 aggregates to be known. There is seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking consciousness. Importantly, consciousness is not a single, continuous entity like a soul. It arises dependently. Seeing consciousness arises only when there is an I and a visible object. Thinking consciousness arises only when there is a mind and a thought. It flickers on and off, moment by moment, illuminating our experience. It is not a permanent, independent witness, but another part of the dependent flowing process. The ancient text, The Questions of King Milinda, offers the most famous and clarifying analogy for this truth. The Bactrian Greek king Milinda, a man of great intellect, sought out the enlightened sage Nagasena to challenge him. The king asked Nagasena his name. The sage replied that he was known as Nagasena, but that this was merely a convenient designation, like a nickname, and that no permanent, individual Nagasena could be found. The king, a sharp debater, thought he had found a flaw. He gestured to his magnificent royal chariot. "Venerable sir," the king asked, "is the chariot the pole?" "No, your majesty," Nagasena replied. "Is it then The axle? No, Your Majesty. Is it the wheels, the frame, the reins, the yoke? Nagasena replied no to each question. Then, is the chariot all of these parts combined? No, Your Majesty. Is the chariot, then, something outside of these parts? No, Your Majesty. The king, triumphant, exclaimed, Then, sir, you are lying. You speak of a chariot. But there is no chariot to be found. Nagasena remained calm. He then turned the king's own logic back upon him. Your Majesty, you say you arrived here in a chariot, but you have just agreed that the chariot is not the pole, nor the axle, nor the wheels, nor any of its parts, nor the combination of its parts, nor something separate from its parts. Then where, Your Majesty, is the chariot? The king was stunned into silence. Realizing his error, Nagasena explained gently, just as the word chariot is a convenient name we give to a collection of parts, assembled in a certain way to perform a function, so the name Nagasena is a convenient name for the collection of the 5 aggregates. When the parts are all here, we call it a chariot. When the aggregates are all here, we call it a being. But if you investigate, you will find no essential chariotness, and you will find no permanent, abiding self. This insight is not just a piece of dry philosophy. It is the key to profound liberation in our daily lives. Think of the immense energy we spend on the project of me. We spend our lives polishing, promoting, and defending this fictional self. When someone criticizes us, who is it that feels hurt? It is this phantom ego. But if we see that the self is just a collection of changing processes, the criticism loses its target. It becomes just an unpleasant sound, a passing thought, a fleeting feeling. We don't have to take it so personally. The same is true of praise. We no longer need praise to validate our existence, so we can enjoy it lightly without becoming addicted to it. So much of our fear is the fear of ego death. We are afraid of failure, of humiliation, of being seen as foolish, because we believe these events will diminish or destroy our self. But if there is no solid self to begin with, what is there to destroy? This understanding frees us to be more authentic, more vulnerable, and more courageous. We become less afraid to say, I don't know, or I was wrong. We become less invested in winning arguments and more interested in understanding the truth. This acceptance of our own emptiness, of a solid self, paradoxically allows us to feel more full, more connected to life. When we see that our own anger is an impersonal, conditioned process, we can look at another person's anger and see the same process at work. We see their suffering instead of their malice. This is the very root of compassion. Accepting anatta is like finally putting down a tremendously heavy burden that we have been carrying since birth. It is the burden of selfhood, the exhausting, never-ending job of being me. It is the release from the prison of our own story. We realize we are not the fixed character in the drama of our life. We are the spacious awareness in which the entire drama unfolds. We have looked at the 3 fundamental characteristics of existence: dukkha, the dissatisfaction that comes from clinging; anicca, the universal reality of impermanence; and anatta, the truth that the one who clings is itself an impermanent, selfless process. Seeing these truths is the function of wisdom. It is the diagnosis. But how do we turn this intellectual understanding into a lived, felt experience? How do we train the mind to rest in this spacious, accepting awareness? For that, we need a practical tool, a method for bringing our attention to the present moment, just as it is. This tool is the foundation of the path, and it is known as mindfulness. We have now surveyed the vast, and at times unsettling, landscape of our inner world. We have seen the truth of dukkha, the pervasive dissatisfaction that hums beneath the surface of our lives. We have faced the relentless river of anicca, the law of impermanence that guarantees nothing will ever stay the same. And we have peered into the profound mystery of anatta, the truth that the solid, separate self we believe we are is an illusion, a beautiful and complex process, but not a permanent entity. To know these truths intellectually is to hold a map, but a map is useless if you do not know how to read it or how to walk the territory it describes. We need a vehicle, a practical method for navigating this terrain, a way to transform this philosophical understanding into a lived, moment-to-moment reality. This vehicle, the very heart of the practice of acceptance, is mindfulness. In the ancient Pali language, the word is sati, which carries connotations of memory and remembering. And what is it that we are remembering to do? We are remembering to be here. We are remembering to come back to the present moment, the only moment we ever truly have. A modern, widely used definition describes mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack these simple words, for within them lies a complete path to freedom. First, on purpose. This is the element of intention. Our minds are almost always paying attention to something, but it is usually happening on autopilot. We are caught in a daydream, lost in a spiral of worry, or replaying an old conversation, all without conscious choice. Mindfulness is the deliberate, gentle act of choosing where to place the spotlight of our awareness. We decide, for this moment, I am going to pay attention to the feeling of my breath. This simple act of intention is an act of empowerment. It is the first step in reclaiming our minds from the chaos of habitual, unconscious thought. It is the training of the mind's attention muscle, a muscle that, for most of us, has been left to atrophy. Second, in the present moment, our bodies exist only in the here and now, but our minds are expert time travelers. They live almost exclusively in the past or the future. We ruminate on past mistakes, replaying them over and over, generating feelings of guilt, shame, and regret. Or we project ourselves into the future, rehearsing for disasters that will likely never happen, creating anxiety, stress, and worry. Look closely at your own experience, and you will find that almost all of your psychological suffering happens when you are not in the present moment. The actual, physical present is rarely a catastrophe. Even when it contains pain, it is the mind's stories about the pain, its projections of a future filled with that pain, that create the most intense suffering. Mindfulness is the practice of returning home again and again and again. We gently escort our wandering mind back to the raw, unfiltered reality of right now. The feeling of the air on our skin, the sound of a distant bird, the physical sensation of breath entering and leaving the body. Third, and most transformatively, non-judgmentally, this is where the true art of acceptance is cultivated. The mind is a judging machine. From the moment we wake up, it is a constant stream of commentary. I like this. I don't like that. This is good. This is bad. I'm doing this right. I'm doing this wrong. This constant judgment is the source of our resistance. We judge a feeling as bad, so we try to push it away. We judge a thought as good, so we try to cling to it. Mindfulness practice invites us to do something radical, to simply notice what is happening without needing to label it, fix it, or evaluate it. It is the cultivation of a kind, curious, and impartial witness. When a difficult thought arises, the instruction is not to fight it, but to note, there is a thought of worry. When a feeling of sadness appears, we simply acknowledge, sadness is present. We observe it with the same gentle curiosity we might bring to watching a cloud move across the sky. This non-judgmental stance is what creates the space for acceptance to arise. This space is the most practical gift of mindfulness. The Austrian neurologist and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." For most of us, this space is so small, it is non-existent. Someone cuts us off in traffic, stimulus, and instantly there is anger, a blaring horn, a shouted curse, response. A critical email arrives, stimulus, and immediately there is a knot in the stomach and a defensive reply being typed, response. Mindfulness practice widens that space. With practice, when the stimulus occurs, we don't just react. We become aware of the reaction as it begins to form. We feel the flush of anger in the chest. We notice the defensive thoughts appearing in the mind. We feel the clenching in our jaw. And because we can see these things happening, we are no longer helplessly identified with them. We have a choice. We can still choose to honk the horn, but we can also choose to take a breath and let it go. We can choose to fire off that angry email, but we can also choose to stand up, walk away, and come back to it later with a clearer mind. This is the difference between being a puppet of our past conditioning and a conscious author of our own lives. It is crucial to clear up some common myths about mindfulness. It is not an attempt to stop thinking or to empty the mind. The mind produces thoughts just as the heart beats. Trying to stop your thoughts is a futile and frustrating exercise that only creates more tension. The goal is not to have an empty mind, but an aware mind. The goal is to change your relationship with your thoughts, to see them as passing mental events rather than absolute truths. Nor is mindfulness necessarily about feeling calm or relaxed. While calm and relaxation are often pleasant side effects of the practice, they are not the goal. The goal is awareness. You can be mindfully aware of great anxiety. You can be mindfully aware of intense anger. The practice is simply to be present with whatever is arising, without judgment. So, how do we practice this? There are two ways: formal and informal. Formal practice is what we typically call meditation. You set aside a specific time, perhaps just 5 or 10 minutes to begin with. You find a comfortable but upright posture on a chair or a cushion. You can close your eyes gently, and then you intentionally bring your attention to the physical sensation of your breathing. You feel the air coming in through your nostrils, the rise of your chest and abdomen, and then the fall of the chest and the air going out. Your only job is to rest your attention on these simple, repetitive sensations. Inevitably, your mind will wander. It will drift off into thoughts, plans, memories, or daydreams. This is not a failure. This is the moment where the practice actually happens. The instruction is simple. As soon as you notice that your mind has wandered, gently acknowledge it without scolding yourself, and then softly guide your attention back to the breath. You will do this 10, 100, 1,000 times. The practice is not about staying on the breath. The practice is in the gentle, patient, compassionate act of returning again and again. Each return is like a repetition that strengthens the muscle of mindfulness. Informal practice is about bringing this same quality of awareness into the ordinary moments of your life. A Zen master was once asked to explain his enlightenment. He said, "When I eat, I eat. When I walk, I walk." A confused monk replied, "But master, everyone eats and walks." The master smiled and said, "But when you eat, you are thinking of 1,000 other things. When you walk, your mind is in another place. When I eat, I am only eating. When I walk, I am only walking." This is informal mindfulness. You can practice it right now. Pick up a cup of coffee or tea. Feel the warmth of the mug in your hands. Notice the steam rising. Bring it to your nose and smell the aroma. Take a sip and fully experience the taste and the warmth as you swallow. For just those few moments, you are fully present. You can do this while washing the dishes, feeling the warm water on your hands. You can do it while walking, feeling the contact of your feet on the earth. This is how the practice moves from a formal, isolated exercise into a way of living. Mindfulness is the foundational skill. It is the workbench upon which we can examine our own experience with clarity and kindness. It is the training ground where we develop the stability and non-judgment necessary for true acceptance. Through mindfulness, we become intimately acquainted with the flow of our thoughts and the weather patterns of our emotions. It illuminates the inner world. And now that we hold this light, we can take the next courageous step to turn it toward the darkest, most turbulent corners of our hearts, and to learn not just to tolerate our difficult emotions, but to befriend them. With the light of mindfulness now in our hands, we have the capacity to see our inner world with greater clarity. We have a tool to pause, to breathe, and to observe. Now, we must take that light and venture into the most feared and misunderstood regions of our internal landscape, the territory of our difficult emotions. For most of us, our relationship with feelings like anger, fear, and sadness is one of warfare. We are taught from a young age that these emotions are negative, that they are problems to be solved, weaknesses to be hidden, or fires to be extinguished. In this war, we typically deploy two failing strategies. The first is suppression. We deny the emotion is there. We clench our jaw, swallow our anger, distract ourselves from our grief, and pretend we are not afraid. We become masters of the brave face, pushing these powerful energies down into the basement of our psyche. The second strategy is uncontrolled expression. We become completely overwhelmed by the emotion. A wave of anger possesses us, and we lash out in ways we later regret. A storm of anxiety takes over, and we are paralyzed by panic. In both cases, we are not free. We are either imprisoned by our resistance to emotion, or we are the puppets of the emotion itself. The path of acceptance offers a third way, a middle path of profound wisdom and courage. It is the path of learning to befriend our emotions. To begin this journey, we must radically reframe our understanding. Our emotions are not our enemies. They are not mistakes or character flaws. They are simply messengers. They are an ancient, intelligent, and vital part of our human inheritance, designed to give us crucial information about our relationship with the world. Fear is a messenger that arrives to say, attention, something you value, perhaps your safety or well-being, may be at risk. Be aware. Anger is a messenger that rushes in to report. A boundary has been crossed. An injustice may have occurred. Something is not right here. Sadness is a messenger that speaks in a quieter voice, saying, you have lost something precious. This is a time for healing, for grieving, for turning inward. If a messenger arrives at your door with an urgent telegram, you do not shoot the messenger. You accept the telegram and read the message. In the same way, the practice of acceptance is about learning to stop shooting our emotional messengers and instead learning to listen to what they have to say. The strategy of suppression is not only ineffective, it is harmful. Imagine trying to hold a large inflatable beach ball underwater. It takes a tremendous amount of constant, focused energy to keep it submerged. The moment you get distracted, the moment your strength wavers, the ball doesn't just surface, it erupts out of the water with explosive force, often at the most unexpected and inappropriate times. This is precisely what happens with suppressed emotion. The anger we swallow at work comes bursting out at home over something trivial. The grief we refuse to feel leaks out as chronic irritability or unexplainable fatigue. This constant internal pressure creates real physical and psychological tension, contributing to everything from headaches and high blood pressure to chronic anxiety and depression. The war against our own feelings is an exhausting one, and it is a war we can never win. So, what is the alternative? How do we practice this art of befriending? We can use a simple, memorable framework, a practice that unfolds in 4 key stages, captured by the acronym RAIN. The first step is R, recognize. This is the application of pure mindfulness. It is the moment we pause and simply notice what is here right now. We mentally whisper the name of the feeling. Ah, this is anger, or fear is present, or hello sadness, I see you. This simple act of recognition is incredibly powerful. It stops us from being unconsciously swept away by the emotion. We are no longer lost in the anger. We are the one who is aware of the anger. This creates an initial, crucial separation. The second step is A, allow. This is where we stop the fight. We give the emotion permission to be here. We let go of the resistance. Allowing does not mean we like the feeling. It does not mean we want to feel angry or afraid forever. It simply means that for this moment, we stop wasting our energy trying to make it go away. It is the moment we stop pushing the beach ball down and just allow it to float on the surface of our awareness. You can say to yourself, it's okay. Let this be here for a moment. You can feel the immediate drop in tension when you cease the internal war. You are allowing reality to be as it is, just for this moment. The third step is I, investigate. Once we have allowed the emotion to be present without resistance, we can bring a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity to it. This is not a heady, analytical investigation of why you feel this way. It is a somatic, embodied investigation of what it feels like. You ask yourself, where is this emotion living in my body? You might find that your fear is a cold knot in your stomach or a tightness in your throat. You might discover that your anger is a burning heat in your chest and face, a clenching in your fists and jaw. You might find that your sadness is a heavy, aching weight behind your heart. By focusing on these raw physical sensations, you anchor yourself in the present reality of the emotion, disentangling it from the catastrophic stories the mind is weaving around it. The story might be, I'm going to fail and everyone will hate me. The physical reality is just. There is a feeling of tightness and a rapid heartbeat. Staying with the physical sensation makes it manageable. It becomes just a weather pattern in the body. The fourth and final step is N, nurture. This is where we bring active kindness and compassion to ourselves for what we are experiencing. Having a difficult emotion is hard. In this step, we offer ourselves the care and tenderness we might offer to a dear friend who is suffering. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh offers the beautiful and powerful image for this stage. He teaches us to hold our anger, or our fear, or our sorrow, like a loving mother holds her crying baby. A good mother does not ignore her child. nor does she yell at it to be quiet. She picks the child up, holds it close, and cradles it with tenderness. She might whisper, "I am here for you. I will take care of you." She simply holds the child in a field of loving awareness, and by virtue of being held in this way, the baby's crying naturally begins to subside. We can do the same for our own pain. We can place a hand on our heart, or wherever we feel the emotion most strongly, and offer ourselves that same message. I am here with you. I know this is painful. I will not abandon you. This act of self-compassion is deeply healing. It also reinforces the truth of anatta, of no self. You are not the crying baby of your anger. You are the loving, spacious, mothering awareness that is holding it. When we apply this practice of rain, we transform our relationship with our inner life. When anger arises, we recognize it as a messenger. We allow it to be there, and we investigate the fiery energy in our body. Then we nurture the part of ourselves that feels violated or unseen, the vulnerable part that lives beneath the anger's protective shield. When fear visits, we recognize it, allow the trembling, and investigate the coldness and contraction. Then we nurture the small child within us who feels threatened, offering it a sense of safety and presence. When sadness comes, we allow the tears and the heaviness. We investigate the ache in our heart, and we nurture our grief, giving ourselves the time and space to mourn our losses without judgment. This is not a quick fix. It is a practice, a lifelong art of turning toward our own hearts with courage and kindness. Each time we do it, we dismantle the old habit of resistance and build a new habit of acceptance. We learn that we are vast enough to contain even the most powerful storms. Our heart is no longer a battlefield, but a sanctuary. And once we have truly learned how to offer this compassionate acceptance to the full spectrum of our own experience, a remarkable thing happens. The barrier between ourself and others begins to dissolve. The compassion we have cultivated for our own suffering naturally begins to radiate outward. We are now ready to take the next step, to learn how to accept others in all their flawed, complex, and beautiful humanity. Having learned to hold the light of mindfulness and turn it inward, to sit with our own pain and offer it the balm of kindness, we are now prepared for the next great expansion of our practice. The inner world, once a battlefield, is becoming a sanctuary. But we do not live in isolation. We live in a world of others, in a complex web of relationships with partners, family, friends, colleagues, and strangers. It is here, in our interactions with other people, that our practice of acceptance is most profoundly tested. It is here that the rubber truly meets the road. So much of our daily frustration, our anger, our disappointment, and our heartache arises from one single, fundamental source: our persistent, deep-seated refusal to let other people be who they are. We walk through life carrying invisible blueprints for how everyone else should behave. Our partner should be more thoughtful. Our children should be more grateful. Our boss should be more understanding. Our friends should see things our way. We invest an incredible amount of mental and emotional energy into this project of trying to manage, control, and fix the people around us. We subtly or overtly try to edit their personalities, correct their opinions, and rearrange their priorities to better match our own. This project is a form of violence. It is a rejection of their reality, and it is the primary source of conflict and suffering in our relationships. We are essentially at war with the truth of who they are, and it is a war that makes both parties miserable. The path of acceptance offers a radical alternative: to lay down our arms, to burn the blueprints, and to learn to love people as they are, not as we wish them to be. The core practice for this is called metta, or loving kindness. Metta is a Pali word that is often translated as loving kindness, but its essence is more like a gentle, unconditional, benevolent goodwill. It is crucial to understand what metta is not. It is not romantic or sentimental love, which is often conditional and possessive. It is not pity, which comes from a place of superiority and creates distance. Metta is the simple, sincere, and powerful wish for a being to be happy and free from suffering. It is a radiation of warmth from the heart that, like the light of the sun, shines on all beings without discrimination, the pleasant and the unpleasant, the friend and the foe. It is a capacity of the heart that can be cultivated and strengthened through practice, just like any other muscle. The classic method for cultivating metta is a formal meditation that unfolds in a progressive sequence. It begins, always, with ourselves. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. You cannot genuinely wish for others' happiness if you are at war with yourself. So, you sit quietly, perhaps placing a hand over your heart, and you offer these phrases of kindness to your own being. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy and strong. May I live with ease. You repeat these phrases gently, allowing their intention to soak into your heart. Once you have established this foundation of self-kindness, you bring to mind a benefactor. This is someone who has been good to you, someone for whom you feel natural gratitude and warmth, a beloved teacher, a grandparent, a dear friend. You hold an image of them in your mind's eye, and you extend the same wishes to them. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy and strong. May you live with ease. Feel your heart opening as you offer this genuine gift of goodwill. Next, you widen the circle by bringing to mind a neutral person. This could be a cashier you see at the grocery store, a person you pass on your daily commute, someone you neither like nor dislike. By extending the phrases of metta to them, you begin to stretch your heart beyond the confines of personal preference. You are training your heart to care about the well-being of others simply because they are fellow living beings who, just like you, wish to be happy. Now comes the most challenging and transformative stage of the practice. You bring to mind a difficult person. This is someone with whom you have conflict, someone who has hurt you, or someone whose actions you find upsetting. This is where the practice truly tests our capacity for acceptance. The instruction here is not to condone their harmful behavior or to pretend what happened was okay. The instruction is to see, beneath their difficult exterior, a suffering human being. You recognize that truly happy, peaceful, and content people do not cause harm to others. Their harmful actions are a direct result of their own pain, confusion, ignorance, and suffering. From this place of wisdom, you attempt, as best you can, to offer them the same phrases. May you be free from your suffering. May you be happy. This is not for their benefit, necessarily. It is for yours. It is an act that frees you from the prison of your own resentment and anger. To wish for a difficult person to be happy is to wish for the very cause that will make them stop being difficult. It is the ultimate pragmatic compassion. Finally, you let the circle become boundless. You radiate the heart's energy of metta in all directions: front, back, left, right, above, and below, extending these wishes to all beings everywhere, without exception. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. There is a famous story from the life of the Buddha that perfectly illustrates this principle in action. A man, hearing of the Buddha's teachings, became enraged. He went to find the Buddha, and in front of a crowd of followers, began to verbally abuse him with a torrent of insults. The Buddha stood still, listening patiently and calmly, his expression one of serene compassion. He did not interrupt, he did not defend himself, he did not become angry. When the man had finally exhausted himself and run out of insults, the Buddha spoke softly. "My friend," he asked, "if you purchase a gift for someone, and that person does not accept the gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The man, taken aback by the strange question, replied, "Well, it would belong to me, of course, since I bought it, and they did not take it." The Buddha smiled gently and said, "Exactly, and so it is with your anger. You have offered me this gift of insults and hatred. I do not accept it." The man was stunned into silence. His anger, having no target to land on, no fuel to sustain it, simply dissolved in the face of the Buddha's unshakable peace. This story reveals a profound truth. Another person's anger, judgment, or negativity can only become our suffering if we choose to accept it, to internalize it, to make it about us. Acceptance of others does not mean we must become a passive receptacle for their pain. This is a critical distinction. Accepting others as they are does not mean condoning harmful behavior. It does not mean you must be a doormat or allow yourself to be abused. In fact, true compassion must include compassion for yourself. Acceptance means, first and foremost, accepting the reality that a person is behaving in a certain way. You stop wasting your precious life energy wishing they were different, and instead deal with the situation as it actually is. Sometimes, the most compassionate and accepting action you can take is to set a very clear, firm boundary. Sometimes it is to say no, and sometimes it is to remove yourself from the situation entirely. But these actions can be performed from a place of clarity, wisdom, and even love, rather than from a place of reactive anger and hatred. You can simultaneously protect yourself from harm while wishing for the other person to be free from the suffering that causes them to inflict harm. On a deeper level, the practice is to look for the Buddha nature in everyone. This is the understanding that within every being, no matter how obscured by layers of greed, hatred, and ignorance, there is a spark of innate goodness, a potential for wisdom and compassion. When we can remember to look for that spark in a difficult person, it changes how we relate to them. We start to see them not as a monster, but as a deeply wounded person, acting out of their wounds. This does not excuse their behavior, but it puts it in a context that allows for a wiser, more compassionate response from us. This outward journey of accepting others, of cultivating metta for the easy and the difficult, inevitably leads us back home. For as we practice, we discover that the person whose flaws we are most aware of, the person we judge most relentlessly, the person for whom we hold the most complicated feelings of all, is our own self. And so, the path of acceptance now requires us to take all the compassion we have cultivated for others and turn that gentle, loving gaze fully inward. We have taken the courageous step of extending acceptance outward, learning to offer the warmth of loving kindness to the difficult people and challenging relationships in our lives. This practice of opening the heart to others inevitably reveals a startling and humbling truth. Very often, the most difficult person we have to deal with, the one we judge most harshly, the one for whom we have the least patience, lives not across the street, but within our own skin. The journey of acceptance, in its most profound sense, must eventually lead us home to the intimate and often fraught relationship we have with ourselves. For many of us, the inner world is not a place of sanctuary, but a courtroom where we are simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the judge, and the verdict is almost always guilty. Living inside our minds is a relentless voice. It is the inner critic, It is the voice of should, the constant narrator of our perceived inadequacies. It tells us we are not smart enough, not successful enough, not thin enough, not disciplined enough. It is an expert at comparison, holding up the highlight reels of other people's lives against our own behind-the-scenes footage. It magnifies every mistake into a catastrophe and dismisses every accomplishment as a fluke. This inner critic operates under a deeply mistaken assumption. It believes that by being harsh, relentless, and unforgiving, it is motivating us. It believes it is protecting us from failure and judgment from the outside world by getting there first with its own internal judgment. But this strategy, a strategy most of us have been running our entire lives, is a profound failure. It does not lead to growth. It leads to chronic anxiety. It does not inspire us to do better. It paralyzes us with a fear of making mistakes. It does not make us more resilient. It grinds us down with the corrosive acid of shame. The path of acceptance invites us to fire this inner critic from its position as the tyrannical ruler of our mind, and to instead cultivate a new inner voice, the voice of self-compassion. This is not self-pity, which asks, why me? Nor is it self-esteem, which is often dependent on external success. Self-compassion is treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would offer to a dear friend who was suffering. It is the application of karunathi wish for a being to be free from suffering to ourselves. This practice can be understood through three core components. The first is self-kindness, as opposed to self-judgment. This is a conscious choice to soften our inner tone. When you make a mistake, misspeak in a meeting, forget an appointment, lose your tempathy, inner critic immediately begins its attack. Self-kindness intervenes. It replaces the harsh, critical voice with one that is gentle and understanding. It says, "That was a difficult moment. You did the best you could. It's okay to make mistakes." It is the simple act of being warm and supportive toward ourselves when we are hurting, rather than pouring salt in our own wounds. The second component is a sense of common humanity, as opposed to isolation. When we fail or feel inadequate, our inner critic loves to tell us a story of separation. Everyone else has it together. I am the only one who is this flawed. This feeling of isolation is a core part of suffering. Common humanity is the potent antidote. It is the recognition that being imperfect, failing, and struggling is not a personal pathology. It is an intrinsic part of the shared human experience. To be human is to be flawed. To be human is to make mistakes. This understanding connects us to others in our imperfection. We are not alone in our struggles. Our personal suffering becomes a bridge to a compassionate understanding of all suffering. It is the profound wisdom Kisa Gautami discovered at the doorsteps of her neighbors. Our pain is not what separates us. It is what we all share. The third component is mindfulness, as opposed to over-identification. This brings us back to our foundational practice. We need to be able to hold our painful thoughts and feelings in a balanced, aware state. We don't suppress our feelings of failure or shame, but we also don't let them become a tidal wave that drowns us. Mindfulness allows us to observe our self-critical thoughts without becoming them. We can see a thought like, "I am a failure," arise in the mind, and recognize it simply as a thought, a passing mental event, rather than an objective truth. This creates the space necessary to then introduce self-kindness and the perspective of our common humanity. There is a traditional Japanese art form called kintsugi that serves as a perfect and beautiful metaphor for this entire process. When a treasured piece of pottery, perhaps a beautiful bowl or cup, is dropped and shatters, It is not thrown away. A kintsugi master carefully collects every piece, no matter how small. He then painstakingly glues the fragments back together using a special lacquer that is dusted or mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The process is slow and meticulous. The finished result is breathtaking. The bowl is not just repaired, it is transformed. The lines of breakage, far from being hidden, are now highlighted in shimmering gold. The cracks become the most beautiful and celebrated feature of the piece. The bowl's history of being broken is now an integral part of its story, a testament to its resilience and its journey. It is considered more beautiful and more valuable for having been broken. We are all like this ceramic bowl. We all carry cracks. We all have a history of being broken by life, by our own mistakes, by loss, and by sorrow. The inner critic tells us that these cracks make us ugly, flawed, and worthless, and that we must hide them at all costs. The path of self-compassion is the art of kintsugi for the human heart. It is the golden lacquer. It does not erase our past or magically remove our imperfections. Instead, it teaches us to hold our broken pieces with tenderness and care. It illuminates our scars, transforming them from sources of shame into symbols of our strength and our capacity to heal. It honors our history. It allows us to become more whole, not in spite of our cracks, but because of them. It is vital to understand that self-compassion is not a form of self-indulgence or a way to let ourselves off the hook. It is, in fact, the very foundation of true responsibility. There is a vast difference between self-blame and taking responsibility. Self-blame is a cycle of shame. It is a repetitive, paralyzing state that focuses on the story that I am bad. It offers no path forward. Taking responsibility, on the other hand, is a growth-oriented process. It requires the courage to look clearly at our actions and their consequences. It involves acknowledging our mistake, feeling genuine remorse for any harm caused, and then asking the crucial questions. What can I learn from this? How can I repair any damage done? How can I do better in the future? Paradoxically, a practice of self-compassion makes it easier to take this kind of genuine responsibility. When we know that making a mistake will not trigger a vicious internal attack, we are far more likely to admit our errors honestly and learn from them. The safety created by self-compassion gives us the strength to be accountable. Ultimately, accepting our own imperfections is not a single achievement, but a continuous, moment-to-moment practice. It is the ongoing choice to meet our own failures with kindness rather than judgment. It is the willingness to see our own struggles through the lens of our shared humanity. It is the art of applying golden lacquer to our own beautiful, broken hearts. As we learn to embrace our own flawed humanity with this gentle acceptance, we find that the harsh voice of the inner critic begins to lose its power. In its place, a quieter, warmer, and wiser voice emerges. A voice that allows us to finally be at peace in our own skin. And with this foundation of inner acceptance, we can now turn to one of the most significant arenas of modern life, where our struggles with perfectionism and self-worth play out most dramatically: our work and our careers. Having learned to approach our own inner landscape with the golden lacquer of self-compassion, we can now turn that gentle, accepting awareness to one of the most charged and challenging arenas of modern life: our work. For so many of us, our identity has become fused with our profession. The first question asked at a social gathering is often, "So, what do you do?" We have been taught that our value as a person is directly proportional to our job title, our income, and the perceived prestige of our career path. This fusion of self-worth and work has turned our professional lives into a primary source of dukkha, a battlefield of anxiety, comparison, and a relentless, exhausting striving that never seems to bring lasting peace. The engine of this suffering is the comparison game. In our hyper-connected world, we are constantly exposed to the curated career highlights of everyone we have ever known. We scroll through feeds filled with announcements of promotions, exciting new ventures, impressive accolades, and celebratory posts about landing a dream job. With each scroll, the inner critic springs into action. It takes note of a former classmate's success and whispers, "You are behind." It sees a friend's new title and says, "You are not achieving enough." We fall into a trance of comparison, measuring our own messy, complex, and often frustrating reality against the polished, airbrushed fiction of others. This is a game with no winners. It is a formula for perpetual dissatisfaction, because the goalposts are always moving. Even those who appear to be winning are often driven by the same deep-seated fear of being left behind. We are all running on a treadmill, convinced that happiness lies at the next milestone, only to find when we get there that the treadmill has simply sped up. There is an old story of two woodcutters who decided to have a competition to see who could chop the most wood by sundown. The first woodcutter was strong and determined. He began swinging his axe and did not stop, working tirelessly through the morning and into the afternoon. He was fueled by the thought of victory. The second woodcutter worked differently. He would chop with vigor for about an hour, and then he would stop for a full 15 minutes. The first woodcutter could hear the silence from the other side of the forest and smiled to himself, confident that his own relentless effort would surely win the day. This cycle continued all day, the first man chopping without pause, the second chopping in focused bursts, punctuated by periods of silence. When the sun finally set, the two men met to compare their piles of wood. The first woodcutter was shocked and dismayed to see that the pile belonging to the second woodcutter, the one who had taken all those breaks, was significantly larger than his own. "How can this be?" he asked, completely baffled. "I worked without stopping. I heard you taking breaks all day. How did you chop more wood than me?" The second woodcutter wiped his brow and replied simply, "Every time I stopped, it was to sharpen my axe." We spend our lives frantically chopping, believing that more effort, more hours, and more frantic activity is the path to success. We listen to the sound of others chopping and worry that we are not making enough noise. The wisdom of this story, and the wisdom of acceptance, is to stop focusing on the other woodcutter and to instead tend to the quality of our own axe. Our axe is our mind. It is our state of being, our level of presence, our clarity of intention. To sharpen the axe is to practice mindfulness, to cultivate peace, to act with integrity. A sharp axe cuts through wood cleanly and efficiently. A mind that is calm, focused, and present engages with its work, no matter how humble or grand, with a powerful effectiveness that frantic, anxious striving can never match. This requires a radical redefinition of success itself. Our culture defines success as a future destination. It is a corner office, a certain number in a bank account, a specific title on a business card. This definition has a catastrophic flaw. It ensures that happiness is always deferred. The present moment becomes nothing more than a stepping stone, a means to an end, something to be endured on the way to that future goal. The path of acceptance offers a different definition. Success is not a destination you arrive at, but a quality of being that you inhabit in the present moment. It is the integrity you bring to your work. It is the quality of your attention as you type an email. It is the kindness you show to a colleague. It is the sense of service you bring to a customer. Under this definition, a person stocking shelves in a grocery store with full presence, care, and a genuine wish to be helpful is, in that moment, more truly successful than a stressed-out CEO who is driven by greed and treats their employees with contempt. Success becomes an inside job. It becomes available to us right now, in this very moment, regardless of our job title. Many of us find ourselves in jobs that we do not love, that feel like a compromise or a dead end. The conventional advice to follow your passion can often create even more anxiety if our passion is unclear or if it doesn't align with the need to pay our bills. The path of acceptance offers a more practical and peaceful approach. It invites you to accept the reality of your current position, not as a life sentence, but as your current field of practice. A difficult job can be a powerful monastery. A demanding boss can be your teacher in patience. A repetitive, boring task can be your opportunity to train your mindfulness muscle. An annoying coworker can be your training ground for metta, for loving kindness. When you stop pouring your energy into resisting your current reality, wishing you were somewhere else, complaining about your situation, that energy is freed up. From this place of calm acceptance, you can then make clearer choices about your future. You can plan your next move, not from a place of desperate escape, but from a place of grounded wisdom. This approach is beautifully encapsulated in the Buddhist concept of right livelihood, or samma ajiva, which is one of the aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right livelihood is the practice of engaging in work that supports life and does not cause harm to yourself or others. On one level, this is about the type of work we choose, steering clear of professions based on violence, deception, or exploitation. But on a deeper, more accessible level, right livelihood is about how we conduct ourselves within whatever work we do. It is about bringing an ethical and mindful quality to our daily activities. It is answering emails honestly. It is managing others with compassion. It is doing our work with a sense of integrity and care, regardless of whether anyone is watching. It is the commitment to sharpening our own axe, to ensuring that the way we spend our working hours is not contributing to the suffering of the world, but is instead, in its own small way, a force for good. To accept your career path, then, is not to become passive or to abandon your ambitions. It is to abandon the toxic game of comparison. It is to find your sense of worth within yourself, not in the validation of others. It is to redefine success as a present moment quality, not a future moment prize. It is to use your current circumstances, whatever they may be, as a fertile ground for the practice of awakening. It is about understanding that the most important work you will ever do is the work of tending to your own mind. As we begin to make peace with our ambitions and the nature of our work, we inevitably come face to face with the great shadow that drives so much of our striving, the deep and pervasive fear of getting it wrong, of not measuring up, of ultimately failing. And so, our path now leads us to look directly into the face of this fear and to discover the unexpected wisdom it has to offer. Having explored the immense pressure our culture places upon the idea of success, we must now turn to face its dark twin, the shadow that haunts our every endeavor, the fear of failure. In our society, success is worshipped as the highest virtue, while failure is treated as a kind of disease, a source of deep shame to be hidden away at all costs. We are taught that a good life is a life of upward momentum, a string of victories and achievements. This narrative makes us terrified of taking risks, of being vulnerable, of trying anything at which we might not immediately excel. The fear of failure keeps us trapped in jobs we dislike, in relationships that no longer serve us, and in a state of quiet, low-grade anxiety, because the perceived catastrophe of failing is more frightening than the slow erosion of our spirit in a life half-lived. The path of acceptance offers us a profound liberation from this prison. It invites us to re-examine our relationship with failure, to see it not as an indictment of our worth, but as an indispensable and invaluable teacher on the path of a meaningful life. The first step is to understand which part of us is so terrified of failing. It is the ego, that constructed sense of a solid, separate self. The ego's entire project is self-preservation, and it builds its fragile identity upon the shifting sands of external validation. When we succeed, the ego puffs itself up. It says, "I am a winner, I am smart, I am worthy." It clings desperately to this identity, becoming addicted to the next win to keep itself inflated. When we fail, the ego feels this as a mortal wound. It interprets the event as a direct assault on its very existence. It says, "I am a loser, I am stupid, I am worthless." It is the ego that experiences failure as shame, as a verdict on our fundamental character. But the wisdom of anatta, of no self, reminds us that we are not this fragile, constructed ego. We are not our successes, and we are not our failures. They are simply events, experiences, outcomes passing through the vast, open space of our awareness. By seeing how the ego hijacks these external events, we can begin to unhook our true sense of well-being from the volatile roller coaster of praise and blame. There is a powerful Zen parable that illuminates a different way of approaching our endeavors. A student of archery was determined to become a master. He would stand before the target, his mind fixated on the bullseye. All of his worth, all of his focus was on the outcome. "I must hit the center," he would think. His body was tense with striving, his mind clouded with the anxiety of success or failure. As a result, his arrows were wild, consistently missing the mark. His master observed this for some time. Then he approached the student and said, "Your problem is that you are trying to hit the target. The target is the future. It is a distraction. Forget the target." The student was confused. The master continued, "Your task is not to control the arrow's destination. Your task is to perfect the arrow's departure. Focus only on the process, here and now." He guided the student to feel the solid ground beneath his feet, to notice the precise feeling of the bow in his hand, to mindfully draw back the string, feeling the tension build in his shoulders, to become one with his breath, and then, at the perfect moment, to simply let go. The goal was no longer to hit the target, but to execute the process with complete, mindful presence. The student practiced this, letting go of all thought of the outcome, immersing himself entirely in the quality of the present moment action. His mind became still, his body relaxed, and in that moment of pure presence and release, the arrow flew, straight and true, embedding itself in the dead center of the bullseye. This is the great secret. We are so obsessed with the targets of our lives, the promotion, the recognition, the successful outcome, that we poison the process with the anxiety of attachment. We are so afraid of failing to hit the bullseye that we can never find the stillness required to make a clean shot. The path of acceptance is the path of the Zen archer. It is about falling in love with the process, not the prize. It is about bringing the full measure of our integrity, care, and mindfulness to the task at hand, and then letting the results be what they will be. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, the arrow will miss. And this is where the second great gift of acceptance comes in. Failure is not a verdict. It is information. It is data. When an experiment fails, a scientist does not conclude, "I am a terrible person." They conclude, "Okay, that hypothesis was incorrect." The failed experiment provides crucial information that points the way toward a new, more effective approach. When a baby learns to walk, it falls down hundreds, if not thousands, of times. We do not call this failure. We call it learning. It is an essential part of the process. We must learn to grant ourselves this same grace. A failed business venture is a masterclass in market realities. A failed relationship is a profound lesson in communication and attachment. When we can see failure as feedback rather than a judgment, it loses its fearful charge and becomes an engine for growth and wisdom. This shift in perspective gives us a profound sense of freedom. The fear of failure is often simply the fear of being seen as a beginner, of looking foolish. When we accept that failure is a natural part of learning, we give ourselves permission to be beginners again. We can take up painting, learn an instrument, study a new language, or start a new hobby, not with the crushing pressure to be an expert, but with a sense of playful curiosity. It allows us to risk, to innovate, to be creative. A life lived without any failure is a life lived in a very small, very safe, and very boring room. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. And a core part of that is being willing to fall. It is also critical to practice separating the outcome from the self. When a project you are leading does not succeed, it is the project that has failed, not you. When a business you have started must close its doors, it is the business that has failed, not you. This is not a mere trick of language. It is a fundamental shift in perception that can save us from the abyss of shame. It depersonalizes the event. It allows us to analyze what went wrong with clarity and objectivity, rather than seeing it through the distorted lens of our own perceived inadequacy. We can look at the situation and say, the market conditions were not right, or our strategy had a flaw, instead of collapsing into the all-encompassing, paralyzing story of "I am a failure." To accept failure, then, is not to become a pessimist who expects to fail. It is to become a realist who understands that setbacks are an inevitable and valuable part of any life worth living. It is about cultivating the resilience to get back up after we fall, perhaps with a few more cracks in our ceramic bowl, but also with more wisdom, more humility, and more compassion for others who fall. It is about understanding that our worth is not determined by the scoreboard of our wins and losses, but by the courage and grace with which we play the game. After we have fallen, after we have experienced a setback, we find ourselves in a state of vulnerability. It is in this tender state that we are most sensitive to the arrows of judgment, both from the outside world and, most potently, from within. And so, our journey now takes us to the crucial practice of cultivating stability in the face of life's ever-shifting winds of praise and blame. Having confronted the specter of failure and seen it not as an enemy, but as a teacher, we arrive at another great arena of human suffering, our relationship with the opinions of others. After a setback, we are often at our most raw, our most vulnerable to the sting of judgment. But in truth, we are swimming in a sea of judgment every moment of our lives. We are conditioned from our earliest days to seek approval and to avoid disapproval. We learn to perform, to please, and to carefully manage the image we present to the world, believing that our safety, our happiness, and even our very worth depend on receiving a favorable verdict from the jury of our peers. This outsourcing of our self-worth is a recipe for perpetual anxiety. It turns us into a leaf blown about by the ever-changing winds of public opinion, and it robs us of our own authentic center. The practice of acceptance offers us a way to find our footing, to build an inner stability so profound that we can remain standing with grace and dignity, no matter which way the wind blows. This is the practice of equanimity. To understand this practice, we must first be honest about our deep addiction to praise. We crave positive reinforcement, a like on a social media post, a word of approval from a boss, a compliment from a friend. When we receive it, we feel a rush of pleasure, a momentary inflation of the ego. But this pleasure is fleeting and treacherous. It makes us fragile. We become dependent on our next fix of validation to feel good about ourselves. Without realizing it, we begin to subtly or not so subtly alter our behavior, not based on our own inner compass of integrity, but on what we believe will win us more approval. We become actors playing a role, and we lose touch with our own authentic voice. The pleasure of being liked is an ephemeral high, and it is always shadowed by the fear of its withdrawal. The other side of this coin, and the source of even greater anxiety, is our terror of blame. Because we are so addicted to praise, we are pathologically afraid of criticism, disapproval, and judgment. This fear is a prison of our own making. It silences us when we should speak up. It makes us conform when we should be unique. It keeps us from making bold choices because we are more concerned with what people might think than with what our heart knows to be true. We must recognize a fundamental truth. We have absolutely no control over the thoughts and opinions of other people. Their perception of us is not a clear window onto our reality. It is a projection of their own inner world, their own conditioning, their own moods, their own insecurities, and their own unmet needs. Trying to manage the opinions of everyone you meet is like trying to tame the weather. It is an impossible, exhausting, and soul-crushing task. The Buddha spoke of this reality as the 8 worldly winds, which are constantly blowing across the landscape of our lives. They come in 4 pairs of opposites: praise and blame, fame and disrepute, gain and loss, and pleasure and pain. These are not extraordinary events. They are the ordinary, unavoidable climate of human existence. There will be times you are praised, and times you are blamed. There will be times you are popular and well regarded, and times you are forgotten or misunderstood. There will be times of material gain, and times of material loss. There will be times of joy, and times of sorrow. The point of the teaching is not to learn how to stop these winds. That is impossible. The point is to stop being a fragile leaf that is helplessly tossed about by every gust. The practice is to become like a great, ancient mountain, so deeply rooted in the earth that you can feel the winds blow. You can acknowledge their force, but you are not uprooted by them. Your peace does not depend on the weather. The story of the Japanese Zen master Hakuin is perhaps the most powerful illustration of such mountainous equanimity. Hakuin was a deeply revered master, known for his wisdom and the purity of his life. In the village near his temple, the beautiful daughter of a shopkeeper was discovered to be pregnant. Her furious parents demanded to know who the father was. Terrified, and not wanting to reveal her lover, the young woman named the one person she thought was above reproach, Hakuin. The parents, overcome with rage and a sense of betrayal, stormed to the temple. They confronted Hakuin, screaming accusations at him, denouncing him as a hypocrite and a fraud. His reputation was instantly shattered. The villagers who had once brought him offerings now whispered and pointed at him with contempt. Through all of this, Hakuin listened with a deep, quiet stillness. When the parents had finished their tirade, he simply replied, "Is that so?" When the child was born, they brought it to Hakuin. "This is your child," they spat. "You are responsible for it." And they left the baby with him. Without protest, Hakuin accepted this new reality. He took the infant into his care. His life changed completely. He now had to go begging through the village, not just for his own meager portion of food, but for milk and supplies for the baby, enduring the scorn and insults of the very people who once honored him. Yet he cared for the child with immense tenderness and love. A year passed. The young mother, tormented by her conscience, could no longer bear the weight of her lie. She confessed to her parents that the true father was a young man who worked at the fish market. The parents were horrified, filled with remorse for their terrible mistake. They rushed to Hakuin, bowing low, apologizing profusely, and begging for his forgiveness. "We are so sorry. We have come to take the child back." Hakuin listened to their confession with the same serene stillness with which he had received their accusations. As he carefully handed the healthy, well-loved child back to them, he said, once again, "Is that so?" Hakuin's inner peace was not contingent on the praise or blame of the world. His sense of worth was not derived from his reputation. He was so firmly anchored in his own center that the hurricane of social opinion was nothing more than a passing storm. He was the mountain. How do we cultivate this inner stability? First, we use mindfulness. When praise or blame comes your way, watch your own internal reaction like a scientist. Notice the pleasant feeling that arises with praise. Notice the sting of pain that comes with criticism. See them for what they are: fleeting sensations, passing weather patterns in the mind and body. By not identifying with them, you rob them of their power to control you. Second, connect to your own values, your own integrity. When you know why you are doing something, and that reason is grounded in your own authentic values, the need for external validation diminishes. Your integrity becomes your anchor. Third, learn to distinguish between useful feedback and mere noise. Equanimity is not about plugging your ears and ignoring the world. It is about developing the wisdom to hear constructive criticism that can help you grow, while letting go of unhelpful negativity or empty flattery. You can take in information without letting it define you. To be free from the opinions of others is not an act of arrogance or a declaration of superiority. It is the ultimate act of self-acceptance. It is the decision to locate your center of gravity within your own heart, your own awareness, your own integrity, rather than placing it in the chaotic and unreliable hands of the world. This unshakable inner peace, this equanimity, is one of the most precious fruits of the practice. It is a strength we will need as we turn to confront the forces of change that are even more powerful and inevitable than social opinion, the forces of change that are written into our own biology. In the unavoidable and deeply personal journey of our own bodies through time, having cultivated the inner stability to stand firm amidst the shifting winds of praise and blame, we must now turn this steady, accepting gaze toward a reality that is even more intimate and inescapable: the nature of our own physical bodies. For many of us, our body is the primary battlefield in our war against the truth of impermanence. Our culture is obsessed with an idealized, youthful, and flawless physical form, and we are taught to see the natural processes of aging, sickness, and change not as a normal part of life, but as a personal failure, an enemy to be fought with every cream, every diet, every procedure, and every ounce of our energy. This war against our own biology is a source of profound and constant dissatisfaction, and it is a war we are all destined to lose. The path of acceptance offers a way to declare a truce, to lay down our arms, and to learn to inhabit our bodies with a sense of grace, gratitude, and peace. Let us first be honest about our culture's frantic war against aging. We are bombarded with images of perpetual youth, and we internalize the message that wrinkles are defects, gray hair is a sign of decay, and a slowing metabolism is a betrayal. We invest immense resources, time, money, and mental energy in a desperate attempt to halt or reverse a process that is as natural and unstoppable as the turning of the earth. This struggle is a direct manifestation of our resistance to anicca, or impermanence. We are trying to hold on to a version of ourselves that is, by its very nature, transient. This fight creates a constant low-level anxiety, a fear of looking in the mirror, and a sense that our own body is somehow letting us down. It prevents us from embracing the wisdom, experience, and unique beauty that can only come with time. The first step toward making peace with our bodies is to radically reframe our relationship to it. We tend to think, "This is my body," which implies a sense of ownership, possession, and control. This belief is the root of our frustration when the body doesn't perform as we wish. The wisdom of acceptance invites us to see the body not as a possession to be owned, but as a precious and intricate vehicle that we have been loaned for this journey of life. Imagine being given a magnificent, one-of-a-kind automobile for a cross-country trip. You would not expect it to remain in showroom condition forever. It would get weathered by the sun, accumulate scratches and dents from the journey, and its parts would naturally wear out over time. You wouldn't get angry at the car for this. You would be filled with gratitude for its service. You would maintain it with care, appreciate its strength, and accept its natural life cycle. We must learn to treat our bodies with this same sense of grateful stewardship. This body is not who we are. It is the temporary, miraculous vessel that carries us through the world. From this sense of stewardship, a powerful practice can emerge: the practice of body gratitude. We spend so much time focused on what we perceive to be wrong with our bodies, the aches, the pains, the perceived aesthetic flaws. This practice invites us to shift our attention to the sheer miracle of what is right. Take a moment to consider the silent, ceaseless work your body performs on your behalf, without any conscious command from you. Consider your heart, a tireless muscle the size of your fist, which has been pumping life-giving blood through miles of vessels every second of every day since before you were born. Consider your lungs, which constantly draw in the very air of the world, performing the magical alchemy of turning it into the oxygen that fuels every cell in your being. Think of your hands, with their incredible capacity to create, to build, to comfort, to communicate. Think of your feet and legs, which grant you the freedom to move, to walk, to run, to dance. When we shift our focus from criticism to gratitude, our relationship with our body begins to transform. It is no longer an object of judgment, but a source of constant wonder. The Buddha taught a practice for his monks that takes this investigation even deeper. It is the contemplation of the 32 parts of the body. Monks were encouraged to mentally dissect the body into its constituent components: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, and so on. The purpose of this was not to induce a morbid sense of disgust, but to systematically dismantle the powerful illusion of the body as a single, solid, beautiful object of attachment. It is a powerful antidote to vanity. When we see the body not as a unified, attractive whole, but as a temporary collection of perishable, biological parts, our obsessive clinging to its external appearance begins to loosen its grip. we realize that our true nature, our true worth, cannot possibly reside in this assembly of flesh and bone. We see its inherent impermanence and fragility, and in doing so, we are freed from the tyranny of its appearance. This same principle of acceptance is vital when we face the reality of illness. This is a delicate area, and it is crucial to be clear. Accepting an illness does not mean giving up. It does not mean resigning yourself to your fate or refusing medical treatment. It means accepting the first arrow, the raw, undeniable reality that the illness is present in your body. You stop wasting your precious energy and life force on fighting the second arrows of denial, anger, and fear. You stop tormenting yourself with questions like, "Why me? This shouldn't be happening." The reality is, it is happening. Acceptance is the starting point for wise action. The stress, fear, and tension that come from mentally resisting an illness flood the body with stress hormones like cortisol, which can compromise the immune system and create an internal environment that is hostile to healing. A state of calm acceptance, on the other hand, allows the body's natural healing capacities to function optimally. It allows you to hear your doctor's advice with clarity, to make decisions about your treatment from a place of wisdom rather than panic, and to conserve your energy for the actual process of healing. Ultimately, making peace with the body is about expanding our definition of beauty. Our culture is fixated on the fleeting beauty of youth. The path of acceptance invites us to see and appreciate a deeper, more enduring kind of beauty. It is the beauty of resilience, visible in a scar that tells a story of survival. It is the beauty of wisdom, etched in the lines around a person's eyes. It is the beauty of a character that has been softened and deepened by life's challenges. Most importantly, it is the inner beauty of a spirit that shines with kindness, awareness, and compassion, a beauty that is entirely independent of the physical form it inhabits. This is the beauty that does not fade with time, but only grows more luminous. Our body is a microcosm of our life. It is a gift, it is a teacher, and it is temporary. We can spend our lives at war with its ever-changing nature, or we can learn to inhabit it as a cherished home, with gratitude for its strengths and a gentle acceptance of its frailties. By making peace with this flesh and blood vehicle, we are practicing, in the most intimate way possible, the art of accepting impermanence itself. And as we find a more peaceful way to inhabit our own physical form, this acceptance naturally begins to radiate outward to the material world we use to furnish our lives, and to the promises of happiness offered by the endless array of objects we desire to possess. Having made peace with the flesh and blood vessel of the body, accepting its transient nature with grace and gratitude, we now turn our attention outward to the world of objects we use to furnish our lives. We have learned to be stewards of our physical form. Now we must examine our relationship with our material possessions. We live immersed in a culture that makes a single, seductive promise, whispered from every billboard, every commercial, and every curated social media feed. Happiness can be acquired. Peace of mind, it suggests, is just one purchase away. A new car will bring you freedom. A new wardrobe will bring you confidence. A new phone will bring you connection. The path of acceptance requires us to look directly and honestly at this promise, and to ask a simple question: is it true? Is this endless cycle of wanting and getting truly making us happy? The very engine of our consumer economy is designed to create a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. It is a system built on generating a sense of lack and then offering a temporary solution. The pleasure we derive from a new acquisition is fleeting. This is viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change, inaction. The thrill of the new car fades as it becomes just a mode of transportation. The joy of the new dress diminishes after a few wears. The cutting-edge technology of our new phone becomes standard and then obsolete with the release of the next model. The moment one desire is satisfied, the mind, by its very nature, immediately seeks the next. This creates a hedonic treadmill where we are forced to run faster and faster, acquiring more and more just to maintain the same baseline level of satisfaction. It is an unwinnable race, a formula for exhaustion, and the very definition of a life spent in restless discontent. In the Buddhist cosmology, there is a realm of beings known as hungry ghosts, or pretas. They are a powerful metaphor for this state of being. These unfortunate creatures are depicted as having massive, distended, empty bellies, symbolizing a vast and insatiable hunger. Yet, they have mouths no bigger than the eye of a needle, and necks as thin as a single strand of hair. They are surrounded by food and drink, but they can never consume enough to quell their agonizing craving or to fill their cavernous emptiness. The very act of trying to satisfy their desire is an exercise in pure frustration. This is not just an ancient myth. It is a profound psychological diagnosis of the materialistic mindset. Our culture trains us to be hungry ghosts. It fosters in us a huge, empty feeling of, I am not enough, and then it tells us to fill that inner void by trying to shove external things, possessions, status symbols, fleeting pleasures through the tiny, pinhole mouth of our senses. It can never work. We are trying to solve an internal, spiritual problem with an external, material solution. The emptiness we feel is a hunger of the spirit, and no amount of material food can ever satisfy it. Beyond the suffering of constant wanting, there is a second layer of suffering that comes from having. The moment we attach our identity or our sense of security to a possession, it ceases to be a source of joy and becomes a source of anxiety. We worry about the new car getting scratched or stolen. We worry about the stock market crashing and diminishing our wealth. We worry about our beautiful home being damaged in a storm. The objects that promised us freedom and ease become our jailers. We become their caretakers, their guardians, their anxious servants. Our possessions begin to own us. The more we have, the more we have to lose, and the greater our fear becomes. We build a fortress of material things around ourselves, hoping it will make us safe, only to find we have imprisoned ourselves within its walls. The path of acceptance offers a radical escape from this prison. It is the wisdom of enough. In the Buddha's teachings, this is captured by two beautiful concepts: apicchata, which means having few wishes, or modesty, and santuthi, which means contentment, or knowing what is enough. This is not a call for a life of grim austerity or a vow of absolute poverty. You do not have to live in a cave to be free. It is a call for a profound shift in mindset. It is the practice of consciously investigating our own lives and discovering the point at which our true needs are met. It is finding the level of material comfort that allows for a dignified, healthy, and safe life, and then making the conscious, courageous choice to step off the treadmill. It is the deep realization that true wealth is not having everything you want, but wanting everything you have. The richest person is not the one with the most possessions, but the one with the fewest needs. There is a classic story that illustrates this truth. A great king, powerful and immensely wealthy, possessed everything a person could: desire palaces, treasures, armies, and delicacies from around the world. Yet, he was a man plagued by anxiety and a deep sense of dissatisfaction. He heard tales of a simple monk who lived in a nearby forest, possessing nothing but a single robe and a begging bowl, who was said to be a person of profound and unshakable contentment. The king, unable to understand this, went to meet him. "Venerable sir," the king said, "I have everything, and yet I am unhappy. You have nothing, and yet they say you are the happiest man in the kingdom. What is your secret?" The monk simply smiled. "Your Majesty," he began, "allow me to ask you a question. If you were lost in the great desert, dying of thirst, your tongue swollen and your throat cracked, what would you give for a single cup of clean water?" The king replied instantly, "I would give half of my kingdom for it." The monk asked, "And if the owner of the water refused your offer?" The king declared, "Then I would give my entire kingdom, all of my treasures, for that one cup of water." The monk's smile widened. "Then you see, Your Majesty, your entire kingdom is worth less than a simple cup of water when you truly need it. I have no kingdom, but I have a clear, cool stream just a short walk from here, and I have a mind that is free from thirst. Now, tell me, who is the richer man?" This is the freedom of accepting enough. It is not a path of deprivation, but a path of immense liberation. How can we cultivate this in our own lives? We can start with mindful consumption. Before making a purchase, especially a non-essential one, we can pause, take a breath, and ask ourselves, what is the feeling I am hoping this object will give me? Am I feeling bored, insecure, or empty? Do I truly need this item? Or am I trying to buy a feeling? Often, the desire dissolves in the light of this simple inquiry. We can also cultivate a practice of gratitude. Each day, consciously bring to mind the things you already have that bring you comfort and ease. A roof over your head, food to eat, clean water to drink, a comfortable bed. This simple practice shifts the mind's focus from a state of perceived lack to a state of genuine abundance. Finally, we can choose to prioritize experiences over objects. The joy from a walk in nature, a deep conversation with a loved one, or learning a new skill tends to be far more durable and enriching than the fleeting pleasure of a new possession. By freeing ourselves from the hungry ghost of materialism, we reclaim a vast amount of energy and attention that can be directed toward things that bring true and lasting meaning. We discover the profound wealth of a peaceful mind and a heart that is content with the simple gifts of life. This exploration of our attachment to things is a powerful training ground. It reveals the patterns of our clinging mind, and it prepares us to face an even more potent and emotionally charged form of attachment, the way we cling to other people, and the fear of loss that haunts our most precious relationships. Having untangled ourselves from the hungry ghost of materialism, learning to find wealth in contentment rather than acquisition, we now arrive at the most intimate and potent arena of human attachment, our relationships. The same mental habit of clinging that we apply to objects, we apply with infinitely more force to people. Our connections with others are the source of our most profound joys, our deepest meaning, and also, inevitably, our most piercing sorrows. To love is to open ourselves to the possibility of pain. To form a bond is to risk the agony of its breaking. The path of acceptance does not offer an escape from this fundamental human reality. Instead, it offers a way to navigate the complex territory of love, loss, and letting go with a wisdom and grace that can save us from the deepest forms of suffering. The very first step on this path is to learn the crucial difference between genuine love and clinging attachment. These two energies feel very similar and are often intertwined in our relationships, but they come from entirely different places and lead to entirely different results. Genuine love, in the Buddhist sense of metta and karuna, is an unconditional, spacious, and generous wish for the other person's happiness and freedom from suffering. It is a celebration of their being. It delights in their autonomy and growth. True love says, "I want you to be happy." Clinging attachment, or upadana, on the other hand, is a contracted, self-centered state, rooted in our own inner sense of lack. It uses another person to try and fill the emptiness we feel within ourselves. Attachment is the voice that says, "I need you to make me happy. I cannot be whole without you." It is the source of jealousy, possessiveness, and the desperate need to control. Attachment is what turns a relationship from a spacious dance into a tight grip. While most of our relationships are a complex mixture of both, the practice of acceptance is a continuous effort to cultivate more spacious love and to gently, patiently loosen the white-knuckled grip of attachment. This loosening becomes possible only when we fully embrace the truth of anicca, or impermanence, within our relationships. Nothing is static. To demand that a person or a relationship remain the same forever is a form of violence against the very nature of life. People change. We change. Our needs, our beliefs, our dreams, and our priorities evolve with time and experience. To expect our partner, our child, or our friend to be the same person they were 5 years ago is to deny them their own journey of growth. Beyond this internal evolution, external circumstances are also in constant flux. Friends move away, romantic partnerships end, family dynamics shift. And beneath all of this is the deepest and most difficult truth of all. Every single one of our relationships will end. This will happen either through separation or ultimately through death. This is a stark and painful reality, and our natural instinct is to push it away, to live in a state of denial. But it is this very denial, this resistance to the truth of impermanence, that creates a constant, low-level anxiety that shadows even our happiest moments. Herein lies a profound paradox. Fully accepting the impermanence of our relationships is the only way to truly love. When we stop trying to nail down the future, when we stop demanding a guarantee of forever, we are liberated to show up fully in the only moment we actually have, the present. Knowing that our time with a loved one is finite and precious becomes the motivation to treat that time with the sacredness it deserves. We listen more intently because this conversation will never happen again. We forgive more easily because we realize that holding on to grievances is a waste of our precious, limited time together. We express our appreciation more freely. Our love becomes less about what we can get from the person and more about what we can give in the moment we are sharing. It is like watching a magnificent sunset. We don't rage against the sun for sinking below the horizon. We don't try to cling to the beautiful colors. Its very fleetingness is what makes it so poignant and breathtaking. We can learn to love the people in our lives with this same sense of reverence for the present moment. We hold them not with a clenched fist, which crushes the thing it tries to possess, but with an open hand, which allows them to be free. Inevitably, however, the sunset does fade. Loss is an unavoidable part of love. The pain of separation, whether through a breakup or a death, is the first arrow. It is the direct, clean, unavoidable pain of a bond being broken. There is no spiritual practice that can make us immune to this first arrow. The Buddha himself did not offer a way to avoid it. What he offered was a way to avoid shooting ourselves with a second arrow. A man named Malunkyaputta, whose son had died, was in a state of inconsolable grief, unable to function, lost in a storm of despair. He went to the Buddha, hoping for a miracle. The Buddha listened with compassion and then explained the nature of his suffering. He told him that the initial event, the death of his son, was the first arrow. It is painful, sharp, and a part of life. But, the Buddha explained, an unwise person, on being struck by this first arrow, immediately begins to torture himself. He creates stories. Why did this happen to me? It's not fair. I should have done something differently. I cannot live without him. This narrative, this mental resistance to what has already occurred, is the second arrow. This is the arrow we shoot into our own hearts, again and again. It is this second arrow, not the first, that is the source of our deepest suffering, the anguish, the prolonged despair, the torment. The path of wisdom, then, is not about dodging the unavoidable first arrows of life, but about learning to not inflict the second, third, and fourth arrows upon ourselves. How do we do this when we are in the throes of grief? We do it by accepting the reality of the first arrow's pain. Grief is not a problem to be solved or a disease to be cured. It is a natural, healthy, and necessary response to loss. It is the price of love. The practice of acceptance means giving yourself unconditional permission to grieve. It means allowing the waves of sadness, anger, confusion, and emptiness to wash over you without judging them or pushing them away. We can use mindfulness to anchor ourselves. When a wave of grief arises, we can notice where it lives in the body. Is it a hollowness in the chest, a tightness in the throat, an ache behind the eyes? By staying with the raw, physical sensations, we can stop ourselves from getting swept away by the runaway stories of the second arrow. We are honoring the pain without multiplying it. We are allowing ourselves to heal. Grief, in this sense, is a sacred process. It is the heart's way of honoring the depth of the connection that was lost. To love in a world of impermanence is the ultimate act of courage. It requires us to open our hearts completely, knowing that they may one day be broken. But the wisdom of acceptance teaches us that a heart that has been broken open by loss can heal into something larger, more compassionate, and more capable of love than it was before. We learn to hold our relationships with a precious, tender, and present moment awareness. This ability to face our personal losses and injustices with a measure of compassionate acceptance naturally brings us to a larger, more challenging question. If we can learn to accept our own private sorrows, how do we then relate to the vast landscape of suffering and injustice we see in the wider world? How do we balance a peaceful, accepting heart with the clear and urgent need for compassionate action? Having learned to navigate the intimate landscapes of love and loss with an accepting heart, we must now zoom out and face a wider, more daunting question. How does this practice of acceptance apply to the world beyond our personal lives? How do we reconcile a peaceful, accepting mind with the overwhelming reality of social injustice, systemic suffering, war, poverty, and environmental destruction? It is one thing to accept the personal, unavoidable arrow of a loved one's passing. It is another thing entirely to accept the suffering caused by human greed, hatred, and ignorance. The immediate, healthy response to seeing injustice is often a flare of anger, a sense of outrage, and a powerful conviction that things should not be this way. The path of acceptance does not ask us to extinguish this fire of conscience. It does not ask us to become passive, apathetic, or indifferent. Instead, it offers a way to transform that raw, reactive fire into a sustainable, luminous, and far more effective light. First, we must be absolutely clear about what acceptance means in this context. To accept injustice is not to condone it. It is not to say that oppression is okay, or that we should simply resign ourselves to the suffering of others. That would be a spiritual and moral failure. In this context, acceptance means something more fundamental and more powerful. It means accepting the reality that this injustice exists. It means looking at the world with unflinching honesty, without the filters of denial or wishful thinking. It is the full acknowledgement of the first noble truth on a global scale. There is suffering in the world, and much of it is caused by human action. This clear, courageous seeing is the absolute opposite of passivity. It is the necessary starting point for any intelligent and meaningful action. To try and solve a problem without first fully accepting its reality is like a doctor trying to perform surgery in the dark. Much of the world's activism and our own personal efforts to create change are fueled by rage. And rage can be a powerful catalyst. It can wake us up from complacency and jolt us into action. But as a long-term fuel, rage is a poison. It is a high-intensity fire that quickly leads to burnout, cynicism, and despair. It consumes the very person who wields it. Action that arises from rage often solidifies an us versus them mentality. It sees the world in black and white, casting opponents not as complex, conditioned human beings, but as monolithic, evil enemies. This deepens division, closes the door to potential dialogue, and often perpetuates the very same cycles of hatred and conflict we are trying to solve. Furthermore, when our minds are clouded by rage, our judgment is impaired. We are more likely to act in reactive, unskillful ways that can be ineffective or even counterproductive. The path of acceptance offers a different source of fuel, one that is boundless, nourishing, and sustainable. This is the fuel of compassion, or karuna, guided by wisdom, or prajna. Karuna is not pity. It is the trembling of the heart in the face of suffering, a deep empathy that is combined with the sincere and active wish to see that suffering alleviated. It is a profound recognition of our shared humanity. Wisdom, or prajna, is the understanding of interconnectedness. It sees that those who perpetuate harm are not inherently evil, but are themselves caught in the grip of their own suffering, their own conditioning, their own fear, and their own ignorance. A wise and compassionate person sees an oppressor not as a demon to be destroyed, but as a deeply sick patient in need of profound healing. This does not mean we allow them to continue causing harm. It means our actions to stop the harm come not from a place of hatred, but from a place of profound love for the whole system, including both the victim and the perpetrator. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, the ideal practitioner is the Bodhisattva. This is an enlightened being who, on the verge of final liberation, makes a great vow to postpone their own entry into nirvana and to remain in the world tirelessly until every last being has been freed from suffering. The archetypal figure of this ideal is Avalokiteshvara, known in Vietnam as Quan the Am, the one who hears the cries of the world. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes. The 1,000 eyes are to see all the different kinds of suffering that exist in every corner of the universe. And the 1,000 arms are to reach out and offer help in 1,000 different, skillful, appropriate ways. The crucial point is that the Bodhisattva's action is not fueled by rage against the world's injustices. It is fueled by an inexhaustible, unconditional compassion. This love is what gives the Bodhisattva their tireless strength and their creative, flexible wisdom. Their heart is at peace, yet their hands are engaged. This is the model for compassionate action, a heart that has accepted reality as it is and is therefore free to respond in the most effective way possible. How do we begin to embody this ideal in our own lives? We start by taking care of our own minds. We cannot bring peace to the world if we are at war with ourselves. Our personal practice of mindfulness and self-compassion is not a selfish retreat from the world's problems. It is the essential training that allows us to engage with those problems without being destroyed by them. From this grounded place, we can begin to practice a form of metta, or loving kindness, for those we consider our adversaries. Bring to mind a person or a group whose actions you find harmful. Acknowledge with clarity the pain and suffering they cause. Then, with courage, try to look deeper. See if you can glimpse the fear, the ignorance, or the inner pain that might be driving their behavior. And from that place, form a sincere wish. May you be free from the suffering that causes you to inflict suffering on others. This practice does not excuse their actions. It frees you from the toxic, corrosive poison of hatred, allowing you to see the situation with more clarity and wisdom. When it comes to taking action, we must release our attachment to a specific outcome. We act not because we are certain of victory, but because the action itself is right. The action itself is an expression of our deepest values, whether that action is donating to a cause, volunteering our time, educating ourselves and others, speaking out against injustice, creating art that inspires change, or simply having a compassionate conversation with someone who holds a different view. We do it with as much presence and integrity as we can muster. We focus on the quality of our effort, like the Zen archer, rather than obsessing over the target. We plant the seeds of peace and justice, and we accept that we may not be the one who gets to sit in the shade of the fully grown tree. To face the world's suffering with an open and accepting heart is not a call to weakness, but a call to a deeper kind of strength. It is the strength to feel the world's pain without being broken by it. It is the strength to look upon those who cause harm, not with retaliatory hatred, but with a clear-eyed, compassionate resolve to stop the harm and heal the underlying sickness. It is the strength to act with unwavering commitment, fueled by the boundless, renewable energy of love. To engage with the world in this way requires a profound sense of humility. It requires us to accept that we do not have all the answers, that the web of causes and conditions is infinitely complex, and that the future is fundamentally uncertain. And so, our journey now calls us to make peace with the great mystery of it all, to learn to act with courage and conviction, even when we cannot see the final destination. It calls us to embrace the wisdom of not knowing. Having faced the great social challenges of our world with a call for compassionate, wise action, we must now acknowledge the humble foundation upon which such action is built. To act with wisdom in a world of infinite complexity requires a profound acceptance of our own limitations. It requires us to make peace with one of the most terrifying and uncomfortable states for the modern mind, the state of not knowing. We live in an age of information, an age that worships data, prediction, and control. We believe that if we can just gather enough information, create the right algorithm, and devise the perfect plan, we can tame the future and bend it to our will. This relentless drive to know and to control is a primary source of our anxiety, because the future, by its very nature, is fundamentally uncertain and unknowable. The path of acceptance invites us to do something radical, to relax our desperate grip on certainty, and to discover the profound wisdom and freedom that lie in the simple, honest phrase, "I don't know." The human mind, and particularly the ego, abhors a vacuum. The unknown is a void, and the ego perceives this void as a threat to its existence. Its primary strategy for survival is to feel in control, and so it dedicates itself to the impossible task of colonizing the future. It does this in two main ways. The first is worry. The mind spins out an endless web of what-if scenarios, trying to anticipate every possible negative outcome. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if this relationship ends? It forces us to live in a state of mental rehearsal for tragedies that have not happened and will likely never happen. It fills the peace of the present moment with the suffering of 1,000 imaginary futures. The second strategy is obsessive planning. We create rigid, detailed blueprints for our lives, our careers, our vacations, believing that if we can just account for every variable, we can force reality to comply. Then, when the inevitable winds of change blow our plans off course, we experience immense frustration, anger, and a sense of personal failure. Both worry and obsessive planning are forms of non-acceptance. They are a refusal to accept the simple truth that life is a fluid, unpredictable, and uncontrollable process. There is an ancient Taoist story that perfectly illustrates the folly of our attempts to label events and predict the future. An old farmer lived in a poor village. He was considered well off, for he owned a horse. One day, his horse ran away. All his neighbors came to console him. "Such terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Maybe, who knows?" A few days later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a dozen wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to congratulate him. "Such wonderful luck," they exclaimed. The farmer just shrugged and said, "Maybe, who knows?" The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and broke his leg. The neighbors came once more. "Oh, what dreadful luck," they lamented. The farmer calmly replied, "Maybe, who knows?" A week later, military officials came to the village to forcibly conscript all the able-bodied young men for a war in which most would surely perish. They saw the farmer's son with his broken leg and passed him by. The neighbors came to the farmer, shaking their heads in amazement. "What incredible good luck," they said. The farmer, looking out over his fields, replied, "As always, maybe, who knows?" This story reveals the profound limitation of our perspective. We see only a tiny fragment of an infinitely complex tapestry of cause and effect that stretches out in all directions through time. What appears to be a blessing may contain the seed of a future difficulty. What appears to be a disaster may be the very event that saves us from a greater one. The wisdom of the farmer lies in his acceptance of not knowing. He withholds judgment. He remains open. He doesn't waste his energy on celebrating good fortune or lamenting bad fortune, because he knows he cannot possibly see the whole picture. He lives in a state of radical acceptance of the present moment, trusting the unfolding of the process. This state of not knowing is not a state of ignorance. It is a state of profound wisdom. In the Zen tradition, a student might approach a great master and ask a profound question like, "What is the ultimate meaning of life?" The student expects a complex, philosophical answer, but a true master might simply look at them with great honesty and reply, "I don't know." This answer is not a cop-out. It is a powerful teaching. It is a sword that cuts through intellectual pretension. It points to the truth that ultimate reality cannot be captured in concepts or words. It can only be experienced directly, in the open, spacious, and silent field of not knowing. We can apply this practice in our own lives. When the mind begins its anxious spiral of what-ifs, we can gently meet it with the farmer's wisdom. What if this project fails? Maybe. Who knows? What if I don't get the approval I'm seeking? I don't know. Let's see. This simple, honest response short-circuits the anxious feedback loop. It brings us back to the reality of the present, where we are safe and whole. Our obsession with knowing and planning actually stifles our own creativity and intelligence. When we have a rigid map, we are only capable of seeing the path that is already drawn. We are closed off to unexpected shortcuts, beautiful detours, and surprising new destinations that are not on the map. By relaxing our grip, by accepting that we don't know the exact route, we become more like a skilled explorer than a tourist. We learn to read the terrain as it appears before us. We become sensitive to the subtle cues and opportunities that life presents in each moment. This state of open, receptive uncertainty is the very wellspring of creativity, intuition, and innovation. It is in the space of not knowing that new possibilities can be born. To embrace uncertainty requires a corresponding emotion, trust. It is a trust in the process of life itself. It is a trust in our own innate capacity to meet whatever arises. This is not a blind, naive faith. It is a trust that is built and strengthened through practice. Every time we face a challenge we thought we couldn't handle, and we handle it, that trust deepens. Every time we survive a loss we thought would destroy us, that trust deepens. We begin to realize that we are far more resilient and resourceful than our anxious minds would have us believe. We learn to trust that even if we cannot see the path ahead, a path will appear beneath our feet as we walk. This practice is not about becoming passive, lazy, or directionless. It is about becoming more agile, more present, and more deeply intelligent. It is the liberation that comes from finally giving up the exhausting and impossible job of trying to be God. We trade the brittle illusion of control for the fluid, dynamic reality of participation. We stop trying to force the river into a pre-dug channel and instead learn to steer our raft with skill and grace upon its mysterious and powerful currents. This newfound comfort with the unknown, this ability to rest in a state of open possibility, is a profound peace. But it is a peace that is most deeply tested when we deliberately remove the noise and distractions of the world. It is in the moments of deep silence and stillness that our mind's final anxieties about emptiness and meaninglessness can surface. And so, our journey must now take us into the very heart of that silence, to learn to accept not just the unknown, but the profound gift of emptiness itself. Having learned to open ourselves to the great mystery of the unknown, to relax our grip on certainty and trust the unfolding process of life, we now encounter an even more subtle and pervasive aversion. It is our aversion to stillness. It is our deep, culturally conditioned fear of silence, of emptiness, of simply being without doing. We live in a world that is a carnival of distraction. Our senses are constantly bombarded by noise, information, and entertainment. Our pockets buzz with notifications. Our screens glow with an endless stream of content. We have trained our minds to crave constant stimulation, to leap from one distraction to the next, like a frantic monkey swinging from branch to branch. We have become so accustomed to the noise that we are terrified of what we might find in its absence. The practice of acceptance now calls us to do the most countercultural and courageous act of all, to be still and to make peace with the uncomfortable beauty of silence. Why does this prospect fill us with such unease? What happens when we finally put down the phone, turn off the television, and simply sit? The external noise stops, but the internal noise becomes deafening. All the thoughts, worries, and anxieties that we successfully keep at bay with our busyness come rushing to the forefront of our awareness. The unresolved grief we haven't had time to feel, the simmering anger we've suppressed, the deep loneliness we've papered over with social media, they all come knocking at the door of our consciousness, demanding to be heard. The restless, hungry ghost within us, starved of its usual diet of stimulation, begins to scream in protest. We feel a powerful, almost unbearable itch to do something, to check something, to consume something, to fill the terrifying void of the present moment. This initial discomfort is the primary reason so many people find meditation difficult or conclude that it's not for them. They mistake the surfacing of the mind's chaos for a sign of failure, when in fact, it is the first sign that the practice is working. Imagine a lake whose water is thick and murky with stirred-up mud. The water is so turbulent and opaque that you cannot see your own reflection, and no light can penetrate its depths. This is the ordinary state of our distracted mind. If your goal is to make the water clear, the most foolish thing you could possibly do is to jump in and start thrashing about, trying to fight the mud or force it to go away. This will only agitate the water further. The only way for the lake to become clear is to let it be, to be completely still. When the water is allowed to rest, the natural law of gravity takes over. Slowly, gently, without any effort on your part, the particles of mud begin to settle. Over time, they drift down to the bottom, and the water becomes crystal clear. The sunlight can now reach all the way to the lake bed. You can see the fish swimming, and on the surface, you can see a perfect, clear reflection of your own face and the sky above. Our mind is exactly like this muddy lake. The frantic stirring is our constant thinking, worrying, and distracting ourselves. The practice of sitting in stillness is the act of letting the water settle. When we first sit, the muder, unresolved emotions and chaotic thoughts becomes more apparent as it swirls around. This is the uncomfortable phase. It feels messy and unproductive. But if we can have the courage and patience to just stay, to just allow the stillness to do its work, the mud will inevitably begin to settle. This is not a process we have to force. It is a natural law of the mind. How then do we practice this acceptance of stillness, especially when it feels so uncomfortable? First, we must start small. Do not set an expectation of sitting in perfect, blissful silence for an hour. That is a recipe for frustration. Start with just 5 minutes, or even 1 minute. The goal is simply to interrupt the momentum of constant distraction. Second, we must be prepared to meet the discomfort with the tools we have already learned. When the feeling of restlessness arises, as it surely will, we can use the rain practice. We recognize it. Here is that feeling of needing to move. We allow it to be there without fighting it. We investigate it with gentle curiosity. What does this restlessness actually feel like in my body? Is it a vibration in my legs? A tightness in my chest? And we nurture ourselves with kindness for taking on this challenging practice. We can even reframe the experience. See this initial discomfort as a form of mental and emotional detoxification. The surfacing of all this mud is a necessary part of the cleansing process. It is a sign that the poison of constant stimulation is beginning to leave our system. If we can stay with the practice, if we can endure the initial discomfort, we begin to discover the profound gifts that are hidden in the heart of silence. Once the mud settles, the first gift is clarity. We begin to see our own thought patterns and emotional habits with a new, objective perspective. We see the stories we tell ourselves, the ways we create our own suffering. This clear seeing is itself liberating. The second gift is creativity. In the silence, freed from the usual clutter of our minds, we create a fertile space for new ideas, fresh insights, and intuitive humptions to arise, seemingly from nowhere. The third and most profound gift is a connection to our own inner wisdom. Beneath the clamorous voice of the ego and the inner critic, there is a quieter, deeper intelligence. It is the voice of our intuition, the wisdom of our heart. We can only hear this voice when the rest of the mind is quiet. It is in the stillness that we find our own true answers, not because we have figured them out logically, but because we can feel their resonance in the core of our being. We don't need to retreat to a monastery to find this stillness. We can weave pockets of silence into the fabric of our busy lives. We can choose to drive to work with the radio off. We can drink our morning coffee in silence without reading the news or checking our email, just feeling the warmth of the mug and tasting the liquid. We can take a sound walk where the goal is not to get anywhere, but simply to listen to the symphony of sounds around us. These small, intentional acts of embracing silence can be profoundly restorative, sharpening our axe for the rest of the day's chopping. Our fear of emptiness is based on a profound misunderstanding. We fear it is a void, a lack, a nothingness. But when we finally summon the courage to sit in the stillness and face it, we discover that what we thought was emptiness is actually a vibrant fullness. It is the spacious, silent, and peaceful awareness in which all things are, thoughts, all sounds, all feelings arise and pass away. It is the clear water of the lake, which was there all along, obscured by the mud of our own agitation. This direct experience of seeing things clearly in the stillness, seeing a thought as just a thought, a feeling as just a feeling, a tree as just a tree, leads us to one of the most sublime states of acceptance. It is the acceptance of reality as it is, without the distorting filter of our judgments and stories. It is the wisdom of suchness. In the deep, resonant quiet that we have cultivated, once the muddy waters of our mind have been allowed to settle, something remarkable begins to happen. We start to see things as they are, freed from the constant agitation of distraction and the forward and backward pull of worry and regret. Our perception becomes clear, direct, and simple. This is the gateway to one of the most profound and liberating states of acceptance, a state the Sanskrit scriptures call tathatha. The word can be translated as suchness or thusness. It is the ability to meet reality directly, in its raw, unfiltered form, without the immediate and habitual layer of judgment, interpretation, and narrative that our minds add to everything. It is the art of seeing what is, simply as it is. To understand the power of suchness, we must first recognize that we live our lives through two distinct layers of experience. The first layer is the raw data of reality. It is the direct information coming through our senses, moment by moment. It is the physical sensation of rain on our skin. It is the sound waves of a person's voice entering our ears. It is the feeling of tightness in our chest, or the thought of a deadline appearing in our mind. This first layer is pure experience. It is what is. The second layer, which our minds construct with lightning speed, is the story about what is. It is our commentary, our judgment, our interpretation. The rain on our skin, layer 1, immediately becomes, what a miserable, depressing day. Layer 2, the sound of a critical voice, layer 1, instantly becomes, that person is attacking me. They are a jerk, and I am a victim. Layer 2, the tightness in our chest, layer 1, becomes, oh no, my anxiety is back. It's going to overwhelm me and ruin everything. Layer 2, almost 100% of our psychological suffering are anger, our anxiety, our despair is generated not in the first layer of reality, but in the second layer of our own story. The path of suchness is the practice of learning to reside in that first layer, to experience the isness of life before we contaminate it with our own narrative. Let's take a common, everyday experience, being stuck in a traffic jam. In the state of suchness, the experience of layer 1 would be a simple series of observations. There is a red car in front of me. The engine is idling. The car is not moving forward. There is a feeling of pressure in my shoulders. A thought about being late has arisen in my mind. These are simply facts. There is a sense of neutral, spacious observation. Now, contrast this with the usual experience of layer 2, the story. This is a complete nightmare. I can't believe this traffic. Of all the days for this to happen, I am definitely going to be late. My boss is going to be furious. This whole day is ruined. This always happens to me. I have the worst luck. Can you feel the difference? The first state is one of peace, even if the circumstances are inconvenient. The second state is one of intense, self-inflicted suffering. The external situation is identical. The only difference is the presence of the mind's commentary. The practice of returning to suchness can be supported by a simple, powerful mantra. It is as it is. This phrase is not a statement of defeat or resignation. It is not saying, I give up. It is a statement of profound realism. It is a tool we can use to cut through the mind's endless loops of resistance and storytelling. When you feel a surge of anxiety, instead of fighting it or getting lost in the story of it, you can gently whisper to your own heart, anxiety is present. It is as it is. When you are faced with a difficult situation you cannot change, this situation is here. It is as it is. This simple, factual acknowledgement acts like a circuit breaker. It stops the momentum of the second arrow. It brings you out of the imaginary past and future and back into the solid ground of what is actually happening right now. It is the ultimate acceptance. It is the end of the argument with reality. And when the argument ends, peace begins. There is a classic Zen story that perfectly encapsulates this state of being. A young, earnest monk, full of philosophical questions, approached a great master. He asked, "Venerable sir, what is the secret of enlightenment? What is the great difference between an ordinary person and an enlightened one?" The master replied, "When an ordinary person is hungry, they do not just eat. They read a book, they watch a screen, they think of 1,000 worries and 100 plans while they are eating. When an ordinary person is tired, they do not just sleep. They lie in bed and their mind races with the regrets of the day and the anxieties of tomorrow. But for an enlightened person, when hungry, I eat. When tired, I sleep." The secret, the great difference, was nothing more than this: to be fully present with what is happening, to do one thing at a time, to meet each moment in its suchness, without the second layer of distraction and commentary. When chopping wood, just chop wood. When drinking tea, just drink tea. This is not a dull, robotic state. It is a state of vibrant, alive presence. To experience life in its suchness is not to become unfeeling. In fact, it is to feel everything more purely and more deeply. When you feel joy, you experience it as a pure, radiant energy, without the clinging mind trying to grasp it, or the anxious mind worrying about its departure. When you experience the pain of sadness, you feel it cleanly, as a pure wave of energy, without the added stories of blame, victimhood, or self-pity that turn clean pain into muddy suffering. By removing the constant static of our mental commentary, we allow the pure signal of life to come through with stunning clarity and fidelity. We begin to see the world with the fresh eyes of a child, full of wonder and free from preconceived notions. We can practice this anywhere, at any time. The primary practice is simply to notice. Throughout your day, become a gentle detective of your own mind. Notice the exact moment when the mind adds a story to a simple fact. The fact, it begins to rain. The story, my plans are ruined. Just see this habit without judging it. The seeing itself is the beginning of freedom. You can also practice with sensory anchoring. When you feel lost in thought, bring your full attention to the raw data of your senses. What are the sounds you can hear right now without labeling them? What are the physical sensations of your body sitting in the chair? What colors and shapes can you see in front of you? This practice pulls you out of the abstract world of your stories and grounds you in the living, breathing reality of the present moment. Tathata, this simple, profound acceptance of what is the natural fruit of all the practices we have been exploring. It is the peace that dawns when we finally end our long and exhausting war with reality. It is the liberation that comes from letting things be exactly as they are, including ourselves. This sublime state of being is not a far-off, mystical goal reserved for sages in remote monasteries. It is a capacity that lies dormant within every one of us, waiting to be awakened. And it is awakened not through grand, heroic efforts, but through the gentle application of awareness to the small, humble, and ordinary moments that make up the whole of our lives. The next step on our journey, then, is to learn how to weave this thread of acceptance into the very fabric of our daily routines. We have journeyed through the profound landscapes of the mind, exploring the deep, philosophical truths of impermanence, no self, and the nature of suffering. We have sat in the stillness and learned to see reality in its pure, unadorned suchness. It is easy to imagine that such profound states of being are reserved for retreats, for mountaintops, for the quiet sanctuary of the meditation cushion. But the true test of this wisdom and its ultimate purpose is not to be found in isolation. It is found in the messy, beautiful, frustrating, and glorious laboratory of our ordinary, everyday lives. The ultimate goal is not to create a special, peaceful life separate from our daily reality. It is to bring the quality of peace and acceptance into the life we are already living. This is the practice of integration, of weaving these profound truths into the very fabric of our being through small, consistent, and compassionate daily actions. The foundation of this integration is the understanding that our daily frustrations are not obstacles to our practice. They are the practice itself. The long line at the grocery store, the frustrating traffic jam, the critical email from a colleague, the spilled coffee on a clean shirt, these are not interruptions to our spiritual life. These are our spiritual life. They are our curriculum. They are the bells of mindfulness, ringing to wake us up from our habitual state of unconscious reaction. To help us work with these moments, we can use a simple and powerful tool, a mental first aid kit, captured by the acronym STOP. Imagine you receive that frustrating email. Your heart begins to beat faster, your face feels hot, and your fingers are already itching to type an angry, defensive reply. This is the moment to stop first. Stop. Just for 1 second. Before you say a word, before you type a character, simply pause. This single act of stopping is incredibly powerful. It interrupts the lightning-fast momentum of your habitual, unconscious reaction and creates a sliver of possibility. Next, take a breath, a single, conscious breath. Feel the cool air enter your nostrils. Feel your abdomen expand, and then feel the warm air leave your body. This is not just a mental trick, it is a physiological one. A conscious breath begins to calm your nervous system, pulling you out of the fight or flight response. It brings you back into your body and into the present moment. Then, observe. In the space created by the pause and the breath, gently turn your attention inward. What are you feeling in your body? Notice the heat, the tension in your jaw, the knot in your stomach. What thoughts are racing through your mind? Notice the stories of blame and injustice. What is the impulse you feel? Notice the powerful urge to attack or defend. You are simply observing this inner storm with the calm curiosity of a meteorologist, not judging it, just noting its presence. Finally, P. Proceed. Having stopped, breathed, and observed, you are now in a completely different state of mind. You are no longer a puppet of your own reaction. You are in a place of choice. Now you can proceed, not with raw, reactive anger, but with a considered, wiser response. Perhaps you decide to wait an hour before replying. Perhaps you decide to walk over and speak to the person calmly. Whatever you choose, it will come from a place of wisdom, not woundedness. This practice of transforming irritations into opportunities can be applied everywhere. When you find yourself waiting in a long line, instead of pulling out your phone to numb the impatience, you can choose to see it as a gift of 2 minutes to practice stillness. Feel your feet planted firmly on the ground. Soften the muscles in your face. Just be there. When another driver cuts you off in traffic, instead of reacting with a surge of rage, you can use it as a bell of mindfulness. Notice the anger arise and pass. Wish the other driver well, recognizing that their hurriedness is likely a sign of their own stress and suffering. You can reframe these daily annoyances, seeing them not as obstacles to your peace, but as the very weights you use to strengthen your muscle of acceptance. There is a tale of a young monk who was deeply troubled by his own impatience and irritability. He would get frustrated with his fellow monks, with the weather, with the quality of the soup. He went to his Zen master and asked for a teaching to help him. The master, instead of giving him a complex philosophical discourse, simply bent down, picked up a small, smooth stone from a riverbed, and placed it in the young monk's hand. "This is your practice," the master said. "Carry this stone in your pocket. Whenever you feel the heat of irritation or the fire of impatience beginning to rise within you, your only task is to stop, place your hand in your pocket, and silently feel the coolness and smoothness of this stone. Let it remind you of the patience of the great earth, which accepts all things without judgment." The young monk followed the instruction diligently. At first, he found his hand was in his pocket, almost constantly, but the simple physical ritual of pausing and feeling the stone began to change him. It created a space between the trigger and his reaction. It broke the circuit of his habit. Over months and years, he found that he needed to touch the stone less and less often. The qualities he was mindfully associating with the stone patience, coolness, steadiness, had slowly become a part of his own nature. The stone was not a magic charm. It was a simple, skillful tool for integrating acceptance into the felt reality of his life. This integration is not only about dealing with the difficult, it is also about learning to fully receive the pleasant. Our brains are wired with a negativity bias. We are like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. We can spend an entire day ruminating on one critical comment while completely forgetting 10 compliments. Therefore, we must consciously train ourselves to notice and savor the small joys that are always present. Make it a practice to intentionally notice 3 pleasant things each day. It could be the exquisite taste of your first cup of coffee in the morning. It could be the feeling of warm sunshine on your skin. It could be the genuine smile of a stranger or the beauty of a single cloud in the sky. When you notice one of these small moments, the practice is to pause just for 10 or 15 seconds and let the pleasant feeling really sink in. Allow it to land. This simple practice begins to rewire your brain, tilting it toward happiness and training it to see the goodness that is already here. We can further weave acceptance into our lives by creating small, personal rituals. It could be the simple act of taking one conscious breath before you turn the key in your car's ignition. It could be a moment of silent gratitude before you eat a meal, acknowledging all the hands and the natural processes that brought that food to your plate. It could be a simple, gentle stretch when you wake up in the morning, a moment to say thank you to your body for the rest it has provided. These are not grand, time-consuming endeavors. They are tiny stitches of mindfulness, used to mend the torn fabric of our distracted attention, slowly making it whole. Ultimately, integrating acceptance is not about adding more tasks to your already busy life. It is about transforming the quality of your presence as you move through the tasks you are already doing. It is the patient, daily work of the monk with his stone, choosing a mindful pause over a mindless reaction. It is the practice of recognizing that our life is not a dress rehearsal for some future, more important event. This is it. The sacred is hidden in the ordinary. Enlightenment is not a destination to be reached, but a way of being with what is already here. As we become more skilled at this, as our capacity to accept both the frustrations and the joys of our daily lives deepens, a new, overarching quality of mind begins to emerge. Our acceptance of life, in all its facets, naturally begins to ripen and blossom into a profound sense of thankfulness. It blossoms into gratitude. We have spoken at length about acceptance, about the practice of allowing reality to be as it is, without the exhausting internal battle. But there is a layer beyond mere acceptance, a state of being that is not passive, but radiantly active. It is one thing to tolerate the circumstances of our lives, to endure them. It is another thing entirely to feel a sense of profound gratitude for them, not just for the moments of joy and ease, but for every single thread in the vast tapestry of our existence. This is the transition from acceptance to gratitude, a movement from simply ceasing our fight with reality to embracing it as a beloved teacher. The mind, conditioned as it is, immediately rebels against this idea. How can one be grateful for pain, for loss, for betrayal, for sickness, or for failure? It seems nonsensical, even offensive, to suggest that we should give thanks for the very things that break our hearts. We are taught that gratitude is reserved for the pleasant, for the gifts we receive, for the sunny days. But this is a limited view, a transactional form of gratitude that depends entirely on external conditions being to our liking. The wisdom we are exploring points to something far deeper, a gratitude that does not depend on circumstances, but on perspective. It is the realization that the most difficult experiences are often our greatest and most transformative teachers. Consider the challenges you have faced. They are not random punishments. They are the forces that shape us, that carve depth into our souls. A life without difficulty would be a shallow one, lacking in the very qualities we admire most in others: strength, compassion, and humility. It is the weight of the world that teaches us strength, forcing us to discover a power within ourselves we never knew we possessed. It is the sting of our own suffering that teaches us compassion, for it is only by understanding our own pain that we can truly connect with the pain of others. And it is the encounter with forces far greater than ourselves, the humbling moments of failure and loss, that teaches us humility, releasing us from the arrogant prison of believing we are in complete control. These are not lessons that can be learned from a book. They can only be etched into our being through direct experience. The difficulties are not the obstacles to our path. They are the path itself. There is a powerful and ancient story that perfectly illustrates this principle. The story of the lotus flower. The lotus is revered as a symbol of purity, beauty, and enlightenment. It rises, immaculate and radiant, above the water's surface. Yet, where does this exquisite flower grow from? It grows from the mud. It is born from the darkest, murkiest, foulest smelling sludge at the bottom of the pond. Without the mud, there could be no lotus. The mud is not an unfortunate circumstance that the lotus must overcome. The mud is the very source of its nourishment, the rich, fertile ground that makes its blossoming possible. The stem pushes its way up through the darkness of the water, just as our practice guides us through periods of confusion and sorrow. And then it breaks the surface, opening its petals to the sun, a perfect expression of beauty that carries the wisdom of the depths from which it came. We, too, are like the lotus. Our struggles, our mud, the messy, difficult, painful parts of our lives are the very conditions necessary for our own blossoming. To wish away the mud is to wish away the possibility of the flower. Gratitude, then, is the practice of honoring the mud. It is looking at the difficulties, the heartaches, the failures, and understanding on a profound level that these are the nutrients for our spiritual growth. Take a moment, in the quiet of your own mind, to practice this. Bring to mind a difficult period from your past, a time you thought you might not get through. Feel the echo of that pain, but do not dwell there. Instead, ask yourself with genuine curiosity, what did I learn from that experience? What strength did I discover because of it? Did it make me more compassionate, more humble, more aware? Did it perhaps change the direction of my life in a way that, looking back now, I can see was necessary? You may find that the event you once cursed as a tragedy was, in fact, a disguised gift, a severe mercy that set you on a more authentic path. This is not about pretending the pain wasn't real. The pain was very real, but the pain was not the entire story. It was simply the beginning of a new chapter. This practice fundamentally shifts our focus. The modern world is an engine of discontent, constantly telling us what we lack. You lack the right car, the right house, the right body, the right vacation. This feeling of lack is a constant, low-grade suffering. Gratitude is the direct antidote. When we practice being grateful for everything, including our challenges, our attention moves from what is missing to the incredible fullness of what is present. We have this breath. We have this body, which has carried us this far. We have this mind, with its capacity for awareness. We have the lessons from our past, the potential of this very moment. Suddenly, we begin to feel a sense of abundance that has nothing to do with material possessions. It is an inner richness, a feeling of being whole and complete, just as we are. This is the profound gift of gratitude. It takes the raw material of our lives, the mud and the sunlight, the sorrow and the joy, and transforms it all into the foundation for a life of deep and abiding peace. We have walked a path together through these ideas, exploring mindfulness, compassion, impermanence, and the blossoming of acceptance into gratitude. Now, we arrive at the culmination of this journey. What does it look like to integrate these principles, to weave them into the fabric of our daily existence? What does it mean to live an accepted life? The first and most important thing to understand is that an accepted life is not a perfect life. It is not a magical state where problems cease to exist, where the sky is always clear, and where you are never again faced with difficulty or pain. To seek such a life is to chase a fantasy, another form of attachment that will only lead to disappointment. An accepted life is not one without problems, but rather a life where one is no longer paralyzed or defined by problems. It is a life lived with a fundamental sense of ease, even amidst the inevitable storms. It is the freedom that comes from finally, truly, laying down our arms and ceasing the futile war against reality. A crucial distinction must be made here: the distinction between practical problem solving and the internal resistance that causes suffering. Acceptance is not passivity. It is not resignation. If your roof is leaking, acceptance does not mean sitting in a puddle and saying, "I accept this water." That is a misunderstanding. Acceptance means acknowledging, without drama or complaint, the roof is leaking. This clear seeing allows for effective action. You can then calmly assess the situation, call a repair person, and get buckets. This is problem solving. The suffering, the part we are learning to let go of, is the internal monologue of resistance that usually accompanies the leak. It's the, "Why is this happening to me? It shouldn't be leaking. This is a disaster. I can't handle this right now." This layer of mental commentary, of fighting against the fact that the roof is, indeed, leaking, is entirely self-generated. It adds a heavy burden of emotional anguish on top of a practical issue, and it clouds the mind, making effective action more difficult. The accepted life is one where we learn to address the leaking roof of our life's challenges without producing the secondary and far more painful layer of internal resistance. Imagine a master dancer. The music begins to play. The music is like life itself. Sometimes it is slow and melodic. Other times it is fast, chaotic, and unpredictable. A novice dancer might fight the music. They try to impose their own rhythm onto it. They are tense, awkward, always a step behind or a step ahead. Their movements strained and full of effort. They are in a struggle with the music. The master dancer, however, does something entirely different. They do not fight the music. They do not even try to control it. They surrender to it. They listen, not just with their ears, but with their entire body. They become one with the flow of the sound, moving in perfect harmony with its rhythm, whether it be gentle or wild. Their grace, their power, their freedom comes not from control, but from this profound act of surrender and union. To live an accepted life is to become a master dancer with the music of existence. We stop trying to force life to play the song we want to hear. Instead, we learn to listen deeply to the song that is playing, and we learn to dance with it. Can you feel the immense relief in this? Think of the sheer amount of energy we expend every day in resistance. The energy spent worrying about the future, ruminating over the past, arguing with what is happening in the present moment, wishing things were different, wishing people were different, wishing we were different. It is a constant, exhausting, internal battle. It is like driving a car with the emergency brake engaged. We burn so much fuel, create so much friction, and yet we move with such difficulty. When we let go of this resistance, when we release the emergency brake, all of that wasted energy is liberated. It is freed up to be used for things that truly matter, for creativity, for connection with others, for purposeful action in the world, for love, for joy. A profound lightness enters our being. We are no longer carrying the crushing weight of our own opposition to life. This is the freedom of the accepted life. It is the spaciousness that opens up when the war within our own mind finally comes to an end. This acceptance, this willingness to dance with life as it is the ultimate act of love. It is to love life on its own terms, not demanding that it conform to our desires. It is to look at the whole of existence, with its beauty and its horror, its joy and its pain, and to say yes to it all. We have traveled a long way together on this inner journey. We began by recognizing a fundamental struggle, the feeling of trying to hold water in our hands, the futile attempt to grasp and control a reality that is, by its very nature, fluid and impermanent. From there, we looked deeply into the causes of our discontent, seeing how our suffering arises not from life itself, but from our attachments, our aversions, and our misunderstanding of the world's transient nature. We then discovered the tools, the simple yet profound practices of mindfulness, learning to anchor ourselves in the present moment through the breath, the body, and the flow of our own thoughts and feelings. We explored how to cultivate compassion for ourselves and for others as a balm for the wounds of judgment. We applied these insights to the most challenging areas of our lives, from the pressures of work to the complexities of relationships, and even to the sting of failure. We learned to see the mud of our lives not as an obstacle, but as the necessary nutrient for the lotus of wisdom to bloom, transforming mere acceptance into a profound and active gratitude. Now, at the end of this exploration, we arrive at the essential message to carry forward. Acceptance is not weakness. It is not resignation or defeat. It is the discovery of an indestructible strength that lies within. Peace, we have learned, is not a destination. It is not some idyllic place where there are no storms. Peace is the ability to keep the mind calm and steady in the very heart of the storm. It is the discovery of a quiet, unshakable center within yourself, a refuge that is always available, regardless of the chaos of the external world. Peace is not something you must go out and find. It is something you must return to. It is your inherent nature. The path forward from here is yours alone to walk, but you are not empty-handed. You have the tools. You have the understanding. This is not a command, but an invitation. An invitation to see your life not as a problem to be solved, but as a dance to be danced. An invitation to meet each moment with awareness and an open heart. The great liberation is not found in changing the world outside of you, but in transforming the way you perceive it from within. The journey does not begin tomorrow, or after you have read another book, or after you have achieved some future goal. The journey begins now. It begins in the simple, sacred space of your very next breath.